if there is a firearm, then follow the likely exit is the main entrance where you likely came in.
Chair, very sorry, but please can we resolve the audio issues before we continue, because that level of feedback.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
3 hours.
Have you got the volume control? Can I try out?
Is that better? Or is it the same from a different angle? It's kind of the same. Things are doing an improvement.
Yeah.
It's not like it is.
Is there any export yet?
Okay. I don't know. I'm sorry.
Sounds better, I think.
Okay. If you like, let's do that. Let's do a tech check, everyone, so everyone can grasp all the full timbre of our speeches. There you go.
Thank you, Nicholas Stevens, Vice Chair from Westbury Henley's Ward.
Councillor David Wilcox, Lotley's Ward. Oh, it's quite echoey and
Ellie Freeman, Bedminster Ward.
Ed Fraser, Green Councillor for East Ward. Is it that? Sorry, your laptop's.
Sorry, Joe Williams, independent member.
Okay. Councillor Jonathan Hacker, Stockwood Ward.
Councillor Tom Blenkinsop, Avonmouth and Lawrence Weston.
Councillor Tim Rippington, Bristol East.
I think Tim has the best one.
Is that the furthest away?
Maybe. I think we emailed the tech support to see if someone can come. I don't know how much we can do. That'd be great. So thank you, Pat. If I didn't tell you, if there's a fire right from the main entrance and wait between the cathedral and the Northern Archdeacon, the toilets there on both sides of the main hall. Apologies for our absence. We have apologies from Councillor Hayward. Think everyone else? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's great. So, one meeting planning point. We're going to move item 13 to the end of the agenda. This is the comments on the debt position, and this is because there was, if any members want to ask questions based on combination data, then that's the opportunity to do that. We might simply reduce the attendance and the ability to do that. So, declaration of interest. Are there any declarations? Jonathan and then David.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm a non-executive director of Bristol Waste.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a non-executive director of Coral Homes.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to look at the minutes from last time and the actions following. Now, just one point I think for Andy, as Richard's not here. I think the only action I think we're waiting for is we asked for a couple of members' briefings and mostly maybe organised. I think we're waiting for one on insurance. I know Richard is away, but it's something maybe come back for the next one. Do any of my colleagues have any comments on the minutes or the actions on them? Okay. Thank you. Okay, sorry.
Just on action number 2, the question about records management and a blanket deletion policy. There is an answer. I'm not sure it really answers the question that's been asked. I just wondered whether somebody could explain that a bit better.
Okay, so the action that the response that we've got essentially describes what the policy is and describes what the policy will do to avoid things going awry in relation to people's lack of understanding of the policy. But it doesn't directly answer the question, which is that policy lawful? So we probably want someone to tell us whether the policy is lawful. So I think we should ask the monitor officer if you can do that for the next one. Thank you. Okay, great. Chair's business. Oh, of course, sorry.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a question about the response to number 16. asset register and evaluation in the accounts. I'm still a little puzzled as to why there's no integration, because I would have thought that would be an integral point of the asset register, is knowing how much it's worth and how it's interpreted in the accounts. So can I have a wider, more detailed explanation other than the paragraph in the spreadsheet, please?
I don't know, Andy's able to comment.
I can comment because generally with fixed asset registers quite often they are standalone products. It is something I think when we get to the next stage of looking at the functionality of our financial system, we will look at integration. Our current products by a company called Unit 4 of Bristol, and they have built in their later versions a asset register. And I do take a point on integration into our actual accounts would be an optimal way to do it. It's just not currently part of the specification we've got at the moment, so we would have to scope it out, set business requirements and look at the future functionality.
So we're planning to have that functionality in the future?
But once we get onto that stage of our financial systems review, at the moment we're going through a process environment.
When's that going to happen?
It'll be well, probably not in the 2026-27 financial year because we'll need to do the market engagement first and inform procurement and decisions. So, but it is something we look at in the future review.
Happy with that so far? Yeah. I think the doors are both closed. Oh no, that door is open. Actually, to make a difference. Okay, thank you. Brilliant. So, chair's business. There are two things to mention. First one, simply people to be aware that the next meeting, the chamber is not available at our meeting in November, and Alison has tried very diligently to find any other alternatives, but the meeting will actually have to take place in the Beer Room, which is the largest room available at that time. We may therefore have to be mindful of attendance, so we may have some people waiting so that we can maintain space for public forum at the in that room. But I think that would be okay, but not as good as we are used to. Sorry, to say one other comment. Okay. So the second issue is something that's happened since the last meeting. Is there's been a publication of the finding from the ICO in relation to the council procedures for SARs as well as FOIs. So I will have an update that I'm going to read out as a briefing, which I've shared with councillors, and there'll be an opportunity for councillors to make any comments afterwards. The key point is to say that this item will be brought substantively to the November meeting. So the Audit Committee should seek assurance in respect to the issues raised with councillors handling a freedom of information request and subject access request in light of recent enforcement actions having been served on the council. So in relation to the FOIs firstly, on the 14th of March 2024, the ICO issued Bristol City Council an enforcement notice relating to FOI compliance. There were two issues required by the enforcement notice: to clear those cases in the backlog at the time of the notice, and to create and publish an action plan. But both of these actions have now been completed. All of the cases that were on the backlog in April 2024 have been responded to, and the action plan can be found in a particular location which I've shared in the report. That this will be published with the minutes including that. There were 149 cases on the backlog as of the 15th of April 2024. All of these cases that were on the backlog in April 2024 have been responded to. As of the 19th of September, there were 67 cases in the backlog. The backlog in 24-25 had 38% of the cases between 1 and 50 days overdue. That's compared to the current 25-26 backlog, where 70% of the cases are between 1 and 50 days overdue. This shows that although we still operate with a backlog, the ages of those cases has reduced. We continue to be just over 70% in terms of timeliness, cases answered within 20 working days, and have done for all the 24-25 and the first quarter of 25-26. This is an improvement from June 23, referencing the practice recommendations where we were at 56%. On the matter of subject access requests, on On the 27th of August 2025, the ICO issued Bristol City Council with an enforcement notice due to its backlog of subject access requests. This notice, including the draft notice, will have legal embargo until the publication by the ICO on the 24th of September, and therefore wider engagement has to be limited. Details relating to the actions being taken to comply with the enforcement notice will be reported to the Audit Committee in November, including details of the action plan to address the backlog of SARs. The notice requires the Council to clear the backlog of cases across the years 2022 and 2025 as follows. 2022, 1 case, 23, 44 cases, 24, 120 cases, 25, 66 cases, making a total of 231 cases. The majority of these cases are managed by the disclosure team within information governance and relate to mostly children's social care and a small number of HR cases. There are also 5 cases for SEND and 2 cases related to adult social care. As of the 26th of September, the total number of backlogs were as follows. 2022, 0 cases, 23, 4 cases, 24, 86 cases, and 25, 63 cases, making the current total of 153. I've asked for a report relating to FOIs and SARs to come to the Audit Committee in November, setting out the details of the action that has been taken in response to the enforcement notice. So I thought it was important to bring that here so members were aware. That's as much as I know, that's as much as what we know up until now, but I did want the report to be brought to the committee in November so that we have an opportunity to discuss it in more detail. However, I can say if there's anything any members would like to say, we'll make time. First, Nick.
Well, thank you for bringing that briefing and informing us of that outcome. I think it is positive that the backlog is reducing now, but as you say, there are still 1 in 3 FOIs which we are answering late. So we need to get better at dealing with freedom of information requests, but crucially we also need to consider why they're being made in the first place. I feel like if we act in a transparent way, then there will be a less of a need for people to seek legal mechanisms to get information from us. And 2 things I'd recommend related to that is, firstly, that we publish the FOIs that we make. So when we provide information to the public, we put that on our own website to say this is public. Many councils do that, but we don't. And the other thing, I think, is it's heavily reducing our redaction on statements and questions, which I know we've made progress with on this committee in the last year, but it's still at a level which is a little frustrating. Moving on to subject access requests, the preliminary enforcement notice was actually received by the Council on the 9th of June, so it would be my preference that that was discussed at our July meeting, even if it hadn't run all the way through the process. I don't know what the harm would have been of informing councillors that we were engaged in a conversation with the Information Commissioner's office there. Again, we need to get better at dealing with the SARs, but we also need to ask what is causing the backlog, and looking through the numbers that the Information Commissioner publishes, there was a 9-fold increase. We went from about 100 a year to 900 a year in 23-24. That it would be good to know in the report in November what caused that. Obviously, don't know just looking at the report, but it was around about that time, for example, that the special educational needs spying scandal was leaked, and many people had cause to ask themselves, what does the council know about me? So again, the lesson is that we need to act in a way as a council that doesn't cause our own citizens to think we have something to hide.
Thank you. I think the next comment was from Joe.
Thank you, Chair. I think for the November meeting it would be helpful to have the governance that oversees the responsibility. Where does the responsibility lie in the authority for the FOI responses? You know, what officers and departments are involved, and what is the process? So I'm just asking if that could be possibly just provided maybe as additional information, so that there's a better understanding of what the current, where the current responsibility and governance structure lies for these responses.
Thank you. I'm sure we can do that. John?
you, Chair. So I look forward to receiving the substantive report at our November meeting. For me, the key question is whether the backlog built up due to resource constraints, or if it was something more disturbing in that. But I hope that we will get the full picture.
Yeah, I concur with the rest of the remarks being made and look forward to the report that's coming in November. I too am interested to know why this issue was not brought to the committee earlier, because I think it's a very concerning issue that should have been brought to the public's attention sooner.
Thank you. Any other comments from anyone? Okay. So, if not, we will move to public forum. So we have a total of 30 minutes for this section. So we will deal with statements first, and then questions. People who ask a question can have up to 2 supplementaries. And we will start with Mike Albury. I think it's
thank you. My statement covers 2 issues. Firstly, due diligence as regards stepping up, and secondly, problems with the accounts inspection public rights that I experienced this year. In terms of the due diligence, I'm extremely puzzled as to why the council is still contracting with stepping up, given the woeful state of the accounts for all 3 stepping up companies. I wrote to the Chief Internal Auditor about this back in the spring, and he told me just to contact the police in Company's House. I don't think that's an appropriate stance to take as a public employee at Bristol City Council. Also, and I wonder actually whether he even looked at Company's House, because anyone with a basic knowledge of accounting, and I'm not a company's accounting expert, but there are constant late submission of accounts, accounts overdue, strike-offs, coming and going, and then balance sheets that don't balance. We know there's a creditor to Bristol Waste for the invoices they paid, initially totaling over £60,000 on behalf of Stepping Up, by this labyrinthine pass-through agreement, or whatever it was called, to effectively create an interest-free loan. We know that's there. No sign of it in any of their accounts. Why isn't that creditor shown in their balance sheet? That to me is a material misstatement, and as I said, potentially fraud under the Theft Act. That could be deemed false accounting. I'm not making any accusations there, but I'm just noting that is actually the case. I also note that thank you, Councillor Coombs, for referring to redactions and censorship statements. My statement was again censored because I mentioned that the monitoring officer and legal services were assisting Bristol Waste in providing these pro bono services to Stepping Up. I don't know why that was redacted. And also a whole section about WECA and due diligence was redacted on the basis of not relevant to this committee. It's entirely relevant. WECA decided that Stepping Up didn't meet their due diligence requirements, and they actually asked Stepping Up to provide a financial guarantee so that they could receive one. Funnily enough, who offered a guarantee? It was Bristol Waste Company. Bristol Waste Company offered a guarantee for the Deputy Mayor's own company so they could get grant. Then, subsequent to that, WECA decided for a second tranche of grants that they still weren't happy with due diligence, and so they asked a third party in the voluntary sector to provide sorry, I've lost my train of thought. A deed of novation, sorry, I've forgotten the term, so that could go ahead. So those issues at WECA are entirely relevant, and I don't think they should be redacted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Mike. Before I go to that, I would just like to say that probably my most important role as chair of this committee is to support the internal audit function. So I do note your reference to the Chief Internal Auditor, and I understand that the comment he was making about if you have concerns about an organisation, you should refer to the police or the relevant authorities, was really simply to say that the role of the internal audit is to provide internal audit functions for the City Council, not to third parties. I don't think there's anything else to that, but that role is important, and that's important for me to say that is an important role which I support. I will refer back to your comment as I've made that comment. Yeah.
Thank you. You're well within your right to state your role, but the Chief Internal Auditor also has a role to enforce the Council's anti-fraud and corruption policy. And I'm not convinced that he did that to the best of his abilities in my case, because that response was to me without thought and just a brush off to say, go and deal with it yourself. I mean, I've got no evidence to the contrary, that, this is all still going ahead. Thank you.
So we will need to move to our second statement, which comes from down.
The central government introduced the fire safety regulations, the consumer standards law and Arabs law because councils have been running housing departments terribly badly. This council was not ready for any of these laws to come into effect. We're not ready for Arabs law because it requires a functioning IT solution to be able to track which flats need repairs or mould addressing. The new NEC IT system is going live soon, not because it's ready, but because the licence for the old system is expiring and the old system was utterly unfit for purpose. The council wasn't ready for the fire safety law, and due to not having up-to-date building plans available for the fire service, that led to the Barton House evacuation being evacuated in an emergency. The terrible state of the housing department was kept secret because it would have been embarrassing for the administration. Multiple times, officers tried to move a risk related to housing to the maximum score of 28, which would have required it to be addressed. In August 2023, John Smith, the Executive Director, moved one of the risks to the highest score, but then 2 weeks later, that risk was moved back down. Then the Barton House evacuation happened. At the end of November 2023, another attempt was made to raise the risk score to the max level on the grounds that an evacuation had already happened because the council hadn't been prepared. But again, somehow, the risk was graded as only likely to happen and moved back down to a score where it could be kept hidden. The council wasn't ready for consumer standards law in April 24. In February 2024, Savills told the council of the huge amount of work that needed to be done and that there was no chance of it being done by April. Even though there was no chance of the council being ready, the risk was still kept at a score of 21 and kept secret. By keeping the scale of the problem secret, it has delayed this council starting to fix the problem. As part of the self-referral to the regulator of social housing, the council included details of a housing transformation programme to avoid getting a D score. The decision to launch this programme has been taken by officers in a private meeting and not published. I do not understand how this wasn't a key decision that should have been taken by a committee. Months ago, I sent an email to the monitoring officer asking for his explanation. I have had no response. 3 weeks ago, at the Strategy and Resources Committee, the Chief Executive said he would get a response to me. I have not had a response. It looks very much like the previous administration kept the problem secret because it would have been embarrassing, particularly since the Mayor was being awarded an OBE for services to local government at the time, while people in Bristol are living in mouldy, unsafe buildings.
Okay, thank you, Dan. If you keep hold of the mic, I think you're first on the next section, which is public questions. So, do you have 2 questions? 2 supplementary questions.
First, could you move your microphone a little bit closer to your mouth, please? It's a little bit hard to hear you. Oh, thank you. I emailed you about one of the answers that I received, saying that it doesn't address the question I asked. Have you been able to find a proper answer, or how are you going to address the situation?
So, I should say, for the audience, so this is your question too.
Yes.
So you have asked a question around the role of politicians in relation in more detail, but we will do that.
Allow me to phrase my question simply then. To me, it looks like there was interference in how risk scores were graded. What processes were in place to prevent politicians or people working in the Mayor's office from putting pressure on officers to artificially suppress risk scores?
Thank you for clarifying that question. We will get a written response as soon as we can. Do you have a second question?
I don't have an answer to. No is the short answer because I don't have an answer to address.
Okay. So next we move to Michael. Do you have up to 2 supplementary questions, Mike?
Thank you. Just trying to find the answer to the first question here. Yeah, in the Chair's response to my first question was, the response given to the question at the time was that this question was moved forward to be Bristol Waste Company for response. It is noted that Bristol Waste Company subsequently provided a response. My question is, why is this question, in the first case, behind the scenes, I've had communications with the Chair and with Democratic Services at length about the redaction and the dealing with my questions and statements, which I can't help feeling are a method of frustrating due process. So, firstly, why is this question accepted? Because I was told, firstly, that it wasn't the business of the committee, I think. Then, secondly, because the Chair had issued a statement about stepping up, saying that he thought it was closed, that it was no longer a matter that was relevant to the committee. If you're going down that way, that second step, that second approach, that seems to me the same as the vexatious argument which Councillor Ribbington has tried to silence me with before. Now, either statements and questions are allowed and pertinent to the committee and can only be barred on constitutional grounds, or the Chair is kind of just constructing ways of avoiding questions and statements. So I don't accept your answer there, because if you're accepting the question, why aren't you giving the answer? The answer might have to come from Bristol Waste, but if it's an answer that should be given to this committee, it should be provided to this committee. And so I want that question, you see, this is how it works, this is how the system tries to frustrate the public. I'm now having to ask a question about a question about a question. It should be, you provide the answer. You either say, we're not answering your question because X under the Constitution, or you answer it. So can I please ask that you answer that question?
So my understanding of the situation is if you ask a question about what does Bristol Waste do, that is out with the responsibility of the committee, that is out with the responsibility of the committee. If you ask about that question and we know the response has been given to Bristol Waste, you ask me a question and we will answer that question. The most important thing is you in the middle of your question, you ask, are there certain topics which you're not allowed to ask about? Absolutely not. So you can ask variants of this question for as long as you like, Mike. You are certainly under no bar from asking about this topic.
I have an email from Democratic Services which states exactly the opposite of that. When I asked at length for an explanation of all of this, I was told that because of your statement and you about stepping up at the last audit committee, that issues around stepping up were no longer relevant to this committee and no longer the business of this committee. So, do you support what Democratic Services said in that email or not?
I'm not going to stop you asking a question, Mike. If you've got a question that you want raising, we will respond to that in the usual way. Do you have a second question?
Yeah, I can ask you a second question. What assurance does the audit committee have that all invoices paid for stepping up by Bristol Waste Company were fully reimbursed to Bristol Waste Company? Bristol Waste Company was paying, as I understand, they were carrying out back office services for stepping up. Well, one of these invoices happened to be not paid for, was still not fully paid off, and was never reimbursed for about 2 years, so it just sat on Bristol Waste books. How many other invoices are there that weren't actually, settled by stepping up, that were paid by Bristol Waste? How do they know that all payments for, on behalf of a third party were actually, were reimbursed? Because I'm concerned now about that.
Okay, so that's a very specific question.
Yes.
You deserve a specific answer.
Yeah, so
Now,
what controls are in place?
Hang on. I suspect there are people in the room who've got that information available to them at this moment. So we will have to have some discussions relating to the council and to Bristol Waste about answering that question. My preference is that we just answer that question, but it will have to be in writing. So thank you, Mike. I hope that gives you some assurance, and we'll get that answer.
Thank you.
So that concludes public forum.
So I just thought of a second supplementary.
Oh, okay.
Well, a member of the public had a statement blocked from this meeting, and it wasn't because of one of the standard rules that normally is used. Can you clarify why that statement was blocked from facility?
So no statement was blocked. So
That's not.
So if I can answer, there was a member of the public who I think is here who had written a statement, and then that statement had an appendix, which was a series of emails between a different member of the public and council officers. We accepted the statement without any amendment or redaction. So, but we didn't accept the appendix. Our expectation was we would publish that statement, but not the appendix. The member of the public then withdrew their statement, which wasn't what I had expected he would do. That's what happened.
You told the member of the public that his statement would not be accepted as he had submitted it for grounds that are not in the Bristol Council Constitution. Can you explain why that statement was refused?
That's not true. We said that we wouldn't accept the appendix, which related to an email correspondence between a member of the public and council officers. We were expecting and intending to publish the statement in its entirety. That's not the appendix.
You refused what he submitted. You're playing word games saying
no, we didn't.
You're playing word games saying it was an appendix and not part of the statement.
So that was our understanding of the common understanding of the statement is the statement is the statement, and then there was an appendix that related to email discussions between other people. We thought it was appropriate. I made the decision that it was appropriate to not publish that appendix, but to publish a statement. That's what we expected to do. I didn't expect the individual to withdraw their statement, but that's their right to do so.
It wasn't a discussion, it was an email that was sent to officers that was not replied to. You refused his statement with the attachment on the grounds that you didn't want it published. Stop playing word games.
No, that's not at all. We were expecting to publish it. We were surprised that it was withdrawn.
He didn't want his statement published with it being modified with part of it withdrawn.
Okay. Thank you. So that is the end of public forum. Thank you to members of the public. You're entitled to attend the rest of the meeting as you wish. We move to... there's a comment. Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask why the third question hasn't got written answers as per the other two questions?
Oh, sorry, the questions from Joanna Booth. No, that's a really important comment. There is a deadline at which questions should normally be submitted. However, we communicated with members of the public that because the report from Grant Thornton was not ready until an unusually late time, that we would allow questions to a much later date than we normally would. Because the important thing is that members of the public have an opportunity to raise questions about all matters, including those matters from the external auditor. The questions that we received there, we received them during that extended deadline and we published them, but it wasn't possible to get a substantive response in that time, and therefore a written response will be given to the individual as soon as possible.
And can they be shared?
And will be published. Thank you. Thank you for checking it. So we will now move to the next item, which is our work programme, which is a description of the intended items that we will cover over the next few meetings. Do my colleagues have any comments on that work programme? No? Okay. So we will then move to the first substantive item, which is the report from Grant Thornton, which gives us a detail of your current progress in relation to the annual accounts. Over to you now.
Thank you, Chair. So we've got two items under the progress report. We will take them separately. First is a progress report on the financial statements, which I'll turn to first. First of all, I'd like to apologise to members, I guess. We had been intending to bring the full audit findings report to this committee in line with our original plans for completing the audit. Unfortunately, we've had some challenges in getting information required. As we've set out in the report, there's been a high level of turnover of finance team members within the team. That's had an impact on our delivery of the audit. So we're not quite where we want to be, but we are looking. Good progress is now being made. So thank you to Andy and his team for putting in place further arrangements and further support to get us to a position where we can progress the audit more expediently. I'll just hand over to my colleague Katie, who will take you through a little bit more detail on the progress report.
Thank you, Barry. So as Barry mentioned, we have made some really good strides in the audit during September. So picking up the pace that we lost at the start of the audit. With the exception of IFRS 16, which is the new lease accounting standard, we are hoping to complete all our audit work in the next 2 or 3 weeks. The IFRS review we're expecting to take a little bit longer, but with discussions we've had with officers, we're expecting to be able to finalise that in early November. Our plan is therefore to bring our audit findings report to the November audit committee, as Barry mentioned. The rest of the report just summarises our progress on the significant risk areas, so the progress we've made so far. We are progressing well with these now, and we've also included a summary of our IT audit findings, which concluded that all IT controls in scope of our review were appropriately appropriate, so we had no findings in respect of that. The rest of the report is our usual sector updates. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, so that's all, David.
Thank you for your report. I've got a question about page 12, the information on technology and IT audit findings. I'd like to know why the technology acquisition, development and maintenance and the technology infrastructure for Active Directory are out of scope for this report, because they really are core to delivering an effective, active, secure Active Directory.
So, sorry, is that again the technology acquisition, development, maintenance and infrastructure, where we would say that's not
goals, yes.
Yes, it's just in relation to Active Directory. We have considered it against all the other areas, against all the other elements of IT domain.
Yeah, I understand that. It's just that to make Active Directory work, you need core resilient infrastructure delivered across the whole network to make it work. And I'm wondering why it's out of scope.
I'll need to come back to you on that with having discussed with the IT auditors, but it was deemed that it was not necessary as part of this year's review. We would have reviewed it in previous years.
Yes, I would like a written answer on that one.
We'll bring that back as part of our final AFR.
So next to Joe.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about IFRS 16, and you mentioned, I wasn't quite sure how to interpret, sorry, this mic. I wasn't quite sure how to interpret what you said. You said that you're hoping to complete the accounts within the next couple of weeks. And I think you said then, except for IFRS 16. So in other words, are you saying IFRS 16 issues are going to delay the finalisation of the audit? And a second sort of attendant question to that is, you say also on page, an early page, progress at 30th of September, You say there that the council believes the IFRS 16 does not have material impact on the accounts. Can I ask what is your view, please?
Thank you. So the council still has some work to undertake before they're able to update the accounts with their journals and the adjustments required for IFRS 16. So we've been given a project plan from officers which confirms the steps that they need to take to be able to get to the point where they can then update the financial statements, and that is going to take a little longer. So that's in progress, and we're getting regular updates on how the council is doing, but we are expecting that to take longer. So early November, we're expecting that to be finalised. So we are working with the council through that period. So every stage they get to where they've got some information to provide to us, we'll be having those conversations throughout. But I think we recognise that it's not a quick job that needs to be done. It needs to have a full review, so that will take a bit longer. We are still expecting that to be complete for us to be able to finalise our audit in November. The second part of your question in terms of materiality, so the council's initial view is that this isn't a material impact on the accounts in terms of the balance sheet, the right of use assets. We can't conclude on that yet because as part of our work, our main risk is around the completeness of the council's review. So have they considered all the different areas where there may be leases, where the council is a leasee, until we get that supporting evidence from the council to see what different areas the council has considered. We can't conclude on that, but that is the kind of main part of our review, is making sure that what the council has considered in terms of that materiality assessment is complete, and that they have considered all different types of leases arrangements that they may have in place.
Okay, thank you. So Nick.
Thank you. Question in two parts about the delay. So to the Director of Finance, if you could talk around the challenge that staff turnover has delayed the presentation of information from BCC to the auditors. How did that happen and how are we dealing with it? And to the auditors, the deliverables slide 13 suggests that the auditor's report due December 2025, the status is recorded as not yet due. A more helpful status update would be whether it is or is not on track. I wonder if you could answer that, please.
So the staff turnover is something we're aware of because there's members of staff that are leaving the finance function, so that was built into our plan in terms of capacity and use of some agency staff. I think what probably impacted the plan more was some sickness in the finance team, but that was something I discussed with colleagues in Grant Thornton as that occurred, and we put in additional resource which has enabled us to get the plan back on track. And I've been attending a weekly meeting with Grant Thornton just to make sure that our interim measures we put in place are giving us the speed up, and that progress has been really good. So we put in a team effort, but some things you can't predict in terms of a plan, and unfortunately that's some staff sickness.
Okay, thank you. And to Jonathan.
Sorry, and is the report on track for December?
Sorry, yes. So we're looking to bring the audit findings report, as I said, to the next audit committee meeting, and then hopefully during our work we will issue our audit opinion in December. As always, there may be some finalisation pieces, but so long as sufficient work has been undertaken, we would hope that we can have delegated authority from the committee, as we have in previous years, to make sure that we can meet the end of December deadline.
Thank you. So, and now we will move to Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've got several comments and questions, if you don't mind. Firstly, it's obviously disappointing that the audit findings report has been delayed. As you know, we've had serious issues with delay in the publication of the council's accounts in the past, and last year we did make progress and we got back on track. So it does feel somewhat as though we've taken 2 steps forward and 1 step back this year. I wonder if there's any issues that you've identified that might be of concern when the report is actually published.
Thank you, Councillor. So I would emphasise that the Council did produce financial statements by the deadline of the end of June, and that enabled us to commence our audit in line with expectations. So where we have audits, because of the resources that we have 2 phases, phase 1 and phase 2, unexpectedly, and Bristol City Council is in phase 1, so actually they do have a good track record of producing the accounts. But as Katie said, the accounts presented for audit didn't include the IFRS 16 work. That is work that's been promised for a period of time, and now progress is being made on that. And it sort of goes back to the earlier question of do we know if it's material or not? Well, we don't know until we've got the evidence, and we've been asking for the evidence, and that work is still underway. I appreciate your comments. It is disappointing that we aren't here. There are very few accounts that were signed off by the end of September, which was always an ambitious deadline that we were pulling together. But I would go back to what Katie has said, which is the audit is very well progressed, and there are just some. We are expecting the next couple of weeks for most of that work to be completed, other than the IFRS 16 work. So depending on how big that piece of work is, if it's not material, then there will be a lot of work. If it is material, then it will be a significant amount of work. So we're just waiting for that. But I can only say we are as disappointed as you are that we're not where we want to be.
Thank you for the update, Barry. In terms of the key recommendations and improvement recommendations that have been raised in 2024-25, I don't think there's any real surprises, though it's disappointing to see that there's an improvement recommendation relating to procurement breaches, because I thought that had largely been fixed. And I wonder if the Chief Internal Auditor has any comment on that.
Chair, if I may, sorry, that's our second report, so we haven't presented that yet, Councillor. So happy for the Chief Internal Auditor to respond to that.
I think we will hold that thought until we get to that section.
So when the report was originally published, I think it was sort of all one report, both the sector analysis and the progress report, if I'm not mistaken, was actually in one document. But now it's been separated into 2 documents. So when I compiled my questions, I did so looking at the original document. So in truth, the questions that I have, I don't know, because it's now been separated into 2 documents, whether they're pertinent to the first document or the second document. So forgive me for that, but there was some element of confusion there. I suspect that probably my other questions would relate to the second document, I think.
Members are happy. I wonder if we hold that point there and are able to move to the second part of the report. Members happy for us to do that. And then you think about your hospital pass with a bit more time. Back to you, Mary.
Thank you. So, and apologies for the confusion, Councillor, in relation to those reports. So my colleague, Jonathan Meek, is here to take you through the interim auditor's annual report. So just to clarify why it's an interim auditor's report rather than the final one, there are 2 reasons. The first is we can't be final until we've completed our final statement, our final accounts work on your financial statements. And the second reason is because we've received objections on the accounts, and again, we aren't able to conclude the auditor's annual report until that work has been concluded, or we're sufficiently satisfied that it's not going to have a significant impact on our overall value for money conclusion. So I just wanted to highlight why at this stage it's coming to you as an interim auditor's annual report. That said, we do want to make sure that we report our findings to you in a timely way and our work is sufficiently complete to be able to do so. So, Jonathan, over to you.
Thank you, Barry. So our value for money work looks at the council's arrangements through three lenses. I'll go through each of them in turn, but they're financial sustainability, which assesses the council's arrangements for ensuring it can deliver its services and plans resources to ensure adequate finances. The second area is governance, which is assessing the council's arrangements for ensuring that the council makes appropriate decisions in the right way. And the third area is improving economy, efficiency and effectiveness, which looks at the arrangements for improving the way in which the council delivers its services. As I said, I'll go through each of those sections in a bit more detail in turn, but if you look at page 7 of our report, our summary shows that there continues to be significant weaknesses in relation to financial sustainability and improving economy, efficiency, effectiveness, whilst we consider this to be a weakness in governance arrangements. As a result of this, we've raised 4 key recommendations in total, and a total of 3 improvement recommendations. As I said now, I'll deal with each of those areas in turn. Starting off with financial sustainability, as I said, we consider it to be a significant weakness in the council's arrangements for securing value for money, and have raised 2 key recommendations. The first key recommendation relates to the funding gaps in the council's medium-term financial strategy as a result of the significant demand and cost pressures it's experiencing within social care. This issue was first raised in our 2022-23 value for money work, and whilst the council has taken steps to manage the medium-term financial resilience, we consider significant weaknesses to remain. We've seen that the council has invested in transformation leadership capacity within social care and made targeted investments to strengthen SEND services through investments in the inclusion and outreach service. However, there remains significant overspend across social care, posing a risk to financial sustainability of the council. We consider this current position to be unsustainable, and general fund reserves will not be adequate to manage medium-term financial strategy funding gaps and support any unexpected financial shock the council faces. On that basis, we've raised the key recommendation that the council should undertake further immediate action to contain expenditure and deliver savings on a recurrent basis across all service areas, with specific focus on the delivery of the social care transformation programmes. Our second key recommendation is also an issue that was first raised in 22-23 and relates to the dedicated schools grant. Dedicated school grant deficits are a national issue, with the statutory override being extended to the end of 27-28. Whilst this is a national issue, we considered the local circumstances in Bristol when identifying a significant weakness. We're concerned that the agreed management plan will not address the deficit, and were the statutory overrides to be lifted, the council's reserves would not be sufficient to meet the scale of the deficit. In 24-25, the DSG deficit saw an in-year overspend of circa £25 million, and expectations are that this deficit will continue to grow over the medium term. On that basis, we consider it to be a significant weakness in the council's arrangements for securing value for money, and have raised a key recommendation that the council should continue to drive forward its DSG management plan, and progress should be actively managed, and this should be done in conjunction with the schools forum. Again, we do know that DSG deficits are a national issue within this context. Across the other areas of financial sustainability we've considered in our work, including prioritisation of spend, consistency of financial plans and management of risk, we consider the arrangement to be appropriate. We have identified 2 areas of further insight around capital planning and optimism bias, where there are learning opportunities for the council to further strengthen arrangements, and they are detailed in our report. Moving on to governance, we have identified that the council has well-established arrangements to monitor and assess risk and gain assurance over effective operation of its internal controls. Ongoing assurance is provided by internal audit, and internal audit reports a reasonable assurance opinion for 24-25. In 2023-24, we raised an improvement recommendation in relation to the current risk management assurance policy, last being updated in 2021. At the point of our work, this recommendation had not been fully addressed, and we therefore raised this improvement recommendation again. We identified no further weaknesses in relation to the council's governance arrangements. The final area of improving economy, efficiency and effectiveness. Again, our work for this year has identified 2 areas of significant weakness. First relates to the grading from the social housing regulator, which identified issues in relation to the fire safety, electrical safety and asbestos safety of the council's houses. We do know that the council has begun to act upon these issues, but we consider it to be a significant weakness in the arrangements at the point of our review. Therefore, we've raised a key recommendation for the Council to continue to address these failings in a prompt manner. Our second significant weakness is an issue with regards to planning and failure to meet statutory deadlines for non-major developments. Designation remains in force at the point of our work and our review. Therefore, we consider it to be a significant weakness in arrangements and raise a key recommendation for the Council to address this backlog. In addition to these two key recommendations, we identified two areas of improvement. The first improvement recommendation relates to data quality issues. Internal audit gave a limited assurance conclusion relating to data quality management, and there have been data quality issues across some service areas. This poses a risk to service quality and compliance to the Council, and therefore raised the recommendation the Council addresses these issues and enhances its existing data governance framework. The second improvement recommendation relates to an issue we first raised in 22-23 with regards to the number and value of contract breaches. In the prior year, we considered this to be a significant weakness, but the continued reduction in number and value of these breaches has meant that we've downgraded the issue to an improvement recommendation for this year. The reason for it still being an improvement recommendation is the Council's target of 2 breaches per month was exceeded, and we consider that weakness to remain at this point, and have raised a recommendation for the Council to reduce this further. For each of the recommendations we've raised for our 24-25 value for money work, management has provided us with a response, and the management actions are detailed in our report. We will continue to review the implementation of these as part of our ongoing value for money work and report our findings in next year's report. Final thing, we do note that a number of our recommendations relate to issues raised in previous years. Whilst there's evidence of progress from the Council in a number of areas, if issues relating to the significant weaknesses do persist, we may have to consider further our powers as auditor, and this will be kept under constant review in future value for money work. Finally, I want to express my thanks to the team at the Council for engaging and responsible for the process that's helped us tremendously, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Jonathan is first in the queue for this section.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you for that informative presentation. I think in effect you've answered the question that I had on improvement recommendation 3 with regard to procurement breaches. Clearly, some of the key recommendations and improvement recommendations are about very serious matters, but I don't think that they're surprises. And in truth, I think we would have expected to have seen those. I am, obviously, like everybody else, I am concerned about the BSG, and I personally found that it was a huge relief when the government extended the statutory overrun. I know that is, in a sense, a sort of temporary fix, but at least it means that the immediate issue, which I think would have actually threatened the viability of the council, has been dealt with to some extent. As the general fund reserve was 34.3 million, and the deficit on the BSG was 88.1 million at the end of the year, and so of course there's a very big discrepancy between those. But I have a question, if you don't mind, and that's on improvement recommendation 6, which was carried over from last year, and that relates to the Bristol Beacon. The improvement recommendation says that the council should report to members setting out how the objectives set by Cabinet in January 2023 for the Bristol Beacon were delivered, including how the current operating model delivers value for money for the council and residents of Bristol, and the conclusion on that is that there's no further action required. I don't think I've actually seen that. I presume that that the expenditure that was incurred on the Bristol Beacon is still fully impaired, and if that expenditure is still fully impaired, then it seems to me that the current operating model doesn't deliver value for money for the council and residents of Bristol. And if it did, then presumably the venue would be recognised as an asset in the council's accounts and not fully written off. And if that was the case, then there would be a credit of, well, the debit to fixed assets and a credit to reserves of about 84.5 million, which would be a complete game changer for the council. So I just question whether that has been delivered, whether the current operating model is seen to be delivering value for money for the council and residents.
If it's possible to comment on that, do you have any, are you able to comment on that, or do you need to come back with more information?
So I think just to clarify that, so we've obviously done a lot of work on Bristol Beacon over the years and looked at the way that it's valued in the accounts. So the way that it's valued is based upon the lease that it has with the Bristol Music Trust. Because that's at effectively a peppercorn rent, then the valuation arising from that lease means that the value to the council in its carrying value is nominal, pound, peppercorn, whatever you want it to be. That's following the technical accounting standards as how you have to value assets of that type. I think the value in the operating model that the Bristol Beacon generates probably goes beyond the book value of the council, of the way that the asset is carried in the asset. So again, what we've done is we've said, has the operating model been reviewed and refreshed? It has been. That's one element. The second element is it valued appropriately in accordance with current accounting standards? And we conclude that it is. So I don't want to conflate the issues as well.
Your question, Mr. Johnson?
Yes, thank you for your response, Barry. I do understand how the value is derived in the accounts, but if it was possible to adopt a different approach, it would be a complete game changer in terms of the council's financial sustainability.
Oh well, good to ask. Any other comments on that paper from my colleagues?
It is just a comment, but just to reiterate really about DSG and the concerns around that. I sit on Children and Young People's Committee as well, and I know the extremely hard work that is happening in that service to try and reduce costs and to manage in this current climate. And it's quite worrying when you say that, the threat is still there, basically, unless we get another extension. And I just wanted to flag that up, really, and make sure that we're all really aware of that we are very far from being out of the woods. And it's a service that is so vital and so important. It can't be, underestimated, the impact that any cuts, any further cuts or any reductions in service will have on our children and young people in our city.
Okay, thank you very much. Nick?
I suppose my reflection on the recommendations, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that all of the key recommendations have been raised before in previous years, which in one way reflects quite poorly in that we've not been able to magic the money out of the air to fix the difference in incomings and outgoings. But on the other hand, nothing bad, nothing at that level has appeared this year that we didn't know about previously. So I'm somewhat reassured that there aren't any new issues that we're not already dealing with. So that's a useful output from this report. Thank you.
That's how I take it. Actually, and it's particularly good to see, because I know a few of my colleagues are in the room, to see the work reflected. That's really important. I think you're going to comment there.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to talk about key recommendation 4, which is about planning. And I'd like to understand what the council is trying to do to mitigate this, considering we have been in special measures since March 2024 and how we're going to get out of them.
I suppose there's no one able to comment, so...
No, I can make a comment, but it would need to be verified by us. And my understanding is that in terms of planning applications, there's been significant progress in terms of the special measures. I think that has to be something that's requested to government to remove that designation. However, I think that isn't as being pursued at the moment, so hopefully we'll see that as being removed going ahead.
Thank you for that, Andy. Can I suggest, Chair, that we have a briefing about this at some point about how the council is getting out of these special measures, because it is bottlenecking development in our city, and we need to be able to address this to make sure that we can build a number of homes that we actually are committed to building.
Yeah, that's fine. Just to confirm that we did an audit on in this area and provided reasonable assurance in terms of the work being done to improve. So I agree with Andy. I think what the council was waiting is formal recognition from the Secretary of State, but the work that we did gave us assurance that things were going well in that space. But I think that the briefing check.
I think that would be a good idea, so if we can discuss with colleagues about that. Any other questions for Grant?
Thank you, Chair. It's just regarding key recommendation for once more, and to partly echo what Councillor Walker said, that there are certainly concerns around the resilience, in that service. So the progress that we made has been notable, but there is certainly a concern there that small changes in resourcing, one way or another, could have a very significant effect. So simply to air that concern.
Thank you very much. Any other comments for Grant? Okay. Thank you, Grant Wilson. We look forward to seeing you again in November. Thank you for your work so far. So we note that report, and we move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the deep dive question in relation to housing. First of all, let's start with an apology for wasting your time last meeting, because there was a little bit more on the agenda than we expected. So we didn't get to it then, which is why we were committed to get to it then. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Richard Jones. I'm the Housing Consumer Standards Programme Lead, so I oversee the delivery of the programme that relates to this risk. Right, I'll give a quick update and sort of summary of the paper, then open up questions, if that's all right. So you'll see in the pack that there's a brief cover report which outlines the risks CRR 60, which is around the failure of the HRA stock to meet landlord statutory requirements, the decent home standard and consumer standards, and leading to regulatory enforcement. The risk level is currently at 28, which is the maximum, and the risk is materialised. The paper talks around the materialisation of the risk and the regulatory judgment from the Regulator of Social Housing on the 9th of July 2024. The paper also gives a bit of context around consumer standards, and it gives some background information around the housing consumer standards, the improvement plan, and the programme governance framework that's with the Housing Consumer Standards programme. It also outlines the Housing Consumer Standards Improvement Strategy, which clearly outlines the journey to compliance with meeting the consumer standards, and we're approaching one of the key stages, so we're reaching milestone 1 at the end of October, which we're making good progress about, and that is around really understanding our data and revising our resident engagement processes and having detailed plans in place. So we're making good progress against that. Then in Appendix A1 is the actual risk summary. that outlines risks, causes, the controls and the risk mitigations. I think it's worth noting that that risk summary is from July because we've rolled the meeting over. I think it's worth noting it's a little bit out of date now, and progress has been made on quite a number of those areas that are outlined in the risk, and we're making good progress to meeting the targets. I think it's worth just pulling out one or two areas. So the NEC system implementation, that's the main IT system for the housing service, that deadline has been extended till the end of October, is now the implementation date. So that's extended from what's in this paper, but good progress has been made to work on that. That implementation of that, as was mentioned in the public forum, is a key dependency with the success of the Housing Consumer Standards Programme.
Could I ask just one immediate question? We are continuing to work to that October deadline.
Yes, we are.
Thank you very much. So, who would like to comment first on that issue? Ed?
Thanks very much. I'm glad that we've finally been able to get some dedicated time to get to this report. I do just want to express a bit of frustration, I guess, that as was just highlighted, the risk register we're looking at is from the 16th of July, and it's disappointing that there wasn't perhaps not a mechanism for daily risk registers to be provided, because quite clearly, quite a lot, there are about 25 to 30 different due dates in there, of which half of those have been and gone or are close by now, and a series of progress percentages which might have absolutely no relevance now. So we might have quite a lot of detailed questions as to what is the date on that thing now and what is the percentage on that thing now. So I'll start with one of those in that spirit on the NEC implementation. So that's now due to go live at the end of this month, it sounds like. Previously in July, we were assessed as being 25% of the way there. How much further have we got in that time? So essentially, how confident can we feel about that go live deadline?
I didn't directly manage that programme, but there is quite a bit of confidence that we will achieve that deadline. There's a couple of key pieces of work. One is around data and how we hold property data within the system, and that's related to this programme, and a lot of progress has been made on that. So we think that blockage is being cleared, and the other area is around our housing register information, and again a lot of progress has been made on that. That actually isn't directly related to the programme here and could be detached from the NEC programme if it had to, but I don't think that's the plan at the moment. So I think confidence of achieving the 27th of October for implementation is reasonably high at the moment.
Further questions? Maybe later. To Joe, I think.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to understand a little bit better the risk document, that you've got the actions on there, but you've also got existing controls. And I wondered about, the link between those, and I think it would be helpful to know these existing controls, and I'm not sure if they're all controls, some of them are just actions perhaps that have happened. Are you able to comment really on how beneficial are those controls in progressing the actions that still have to happen? What's the link between them? Is there a link between most of them, or are they kind of discrete controls that are in place, and the actions relating to getting them established have been done and dusted?
Yeah. For me, I think the most important controls for the council is around the governance framework, so making sure we've got really robust process and monitoring of delivery, both within business as usual and within the delivery of the programme. I think the programme is intrinsically linked to business as usual activity. So ultimately, most of the service improvement is being carried out within the individual teams, and the programme is, if you like, putting a net over it and being able to capture performance. So there is a really important control around the programme reporting. There's a monthly programme board. There's every Homes and Housing Delivery Committee has an update on progress against the programme and the key delivery actions. So I think that those controls are really important, and they really have helped to really improve visibility of the progress that's being made, but also of general performance reporting. So within the programme we have improved the performance reporting, so there's much more visibility of how we're doing with key activities, and it's much more closely scrutinised than it had probably the programme being in place. So I would say those controls are really important, as well as things like the internal audit, and we have employee Savills who carry out a critical friend function. Again, they bring external oversight and expertise in this area to challenge us and to hold us to account on the delivery of the programme. So I suppose a bit long-winded, but I would say the control environment is much enhanced from what it was pre-programme being in place, and that will be carried on into business as usual to help keep the assurance in place that we are achieving these statutory requirements going forward.
Sorry, Chair, just one other quick sort of question really. So are we including in this large improvement, ambitious programme, the views of tenants? Where's that fitting in? And you know, where's the feedback from tenants reflected?
Yeah. As part of Milestone 1, it might not be reflected directly in this risk, but as part of Milestone 1, we are reviewing our approach to resident engagement, and there's a task and finish group which is being led by the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee on our approach to resident engagement, and that's due to report back in October. So that will refresh our approach to resident engagement. And also within the programme, we're going to refresh our what we call residents' voice strategy to make sure that we hear all of the residents' voice, and we are very customer-centric basically. That's another key activity within the programme, which is due to be completed by the end of March 2026.
And I believe that we're currently recruiting tenants to be part of the new residents now, so it's always something to roll back.
Apologies, I don't have a question which my colleagues remind me of, and I think we just said it remind me as well, regarding the actually about the phrase task and finish group. So there was a residents engagement task and finish group that's from a group of councillors that has particular purpose in our democratic structures, as they do across all policy committees. But in one of the points here around NEC implementation, it refers to an NEC reporting task and finish group, which I'm not familiar with. So can I clarify, is that a comment that relates to the residents engagement task and finish group, or is there some other kind of structure that's being referred to with that terminology? It's a slightly anal point, but it's important that we have a distinction of terminology when it's something in our democratic structures.
Yeah, sorry. The NEC reporting task and finish group is completely separate. That's an officer-led activity to ensure that all of the reporting is in place to support the NEC implementation. So sorry about the confusion.
Okay, thank you. And can I just establish the appropriateness of using the phrase task and finish group, because to the public that would appear to be confusing. They might then expect that to be something that is then driven by members rather than by officers, so that could create some confusion in the public domain.
Okay.
Thank you. And I think we heard one from Nick.
Thank you, yes. I have a few questions about progress, but I think first an observation is is that being summoned to the audit committee isn't supposed to be a pleasant experience. And therefore I will start by noting that the paper that we've been given, while it may have been up to date in July, it was deferred by 3 months and no one thought to update the paper or indeed the attachments to it. So the purpose of summoning a directorate to this meeting is to give us assurance that that section of the council is on top of its brief and it cares about the issue that it is charged with, and giving us a 3-month out-of-date paper with a risk report which is frankly completely out of date, considering that there is a milestone happening this month and we can't see whether it's been met or not, does not answer that challenge of demonstrating assurance. On to the substantive. I think in order to demonstrate progress, what I'm supposed to do is compare the standards in paragraph 11 of the cover report, which shows the 4 milestones, against the actions and the dates within the risk paper, the appendix. Now, the most important thing for us as councillors is to ensure that the people who rent from us and live in our homes live in safety and comfortable lives, free from the fear of building collapse caused by us not complying with standards. But the way that we measure this is, are we complying with standards? So that's what I'm going to focus on. And it looks like the objective is to comply with the law by milestone 2, so the end of the year. So that's what we're trying to assure ourselves on, that the council will be compliant with standards by the end of the year, and we can get sign-off from the regulator. So could we go through milestone 1? That is supposed to happen now. You said that we're on course. How that relates to the actions on the risk report. And then milestone 2, there are, I think, 4 bullet points there. Although maybe those are not the milestones. But what are the items on milestone 2 for December 25 that align with actions which are due in December 25? Because I only see 2 of them there, and it doesn't quite line up for me. So could you reassure us on progress against that plan, please?
Thank you. I'll talk about milestone 1 first, and I'll pick out some examples. So the actions that relate to, I'll pick out a couple of actions relate to the milestone 1. So one example is in the mitigating actions, the develop the consumer standards improvement strategy. That's a milestone 1 activity. Things like the Arabs law, undertaking independent review, and the asbestos safety, undertaking independent review. They are both milestone 1 activities, both been completed. Undertake the independent health check on NEC. That was a milestone 1 activity. That has been completed also. I suppose I don't want to go down every single one, but that will give you sort of a flavour of something. Implementing the NEC system as a whole is a milestone 1 activity, so it is very closely linked to the implementation of the system. Also, things as we go further down, like the strategic asset management, which review, undertake and refresh asset data, is a milestone 1 activity. I think I did want to just pull out, you say that milestone 2 is to be fully compliant. Unfortunately, milestone 2 isn't to be fully compliant. Milestone 2 is to deliver the high risk items, so the most serious failings. So where you have things like a fire risk assessment, or you have an electrical inspection carried out and there are outstanding high risk actions that are related to that, we say we'll complete those by December. That doesn't mean that we'll be 100% compliant with all statutory obligations, because we won't. Really, milestone 3 is really looking to push us into that business as you can get as much closer to that position.
Could you just look at the first sentence of paragraph 11 then,
Yeah.
against that? The council will retain non-compliant rating until milestone 2 has been achieved.
Yeah, so what I mean by that is around C3 rating. So C2 organisations, C3 means that you're non-compliant with the housing consumer standards and you have serious failings, basically. C4, which is worse, is you have those serious failings, but you haven't got, the regulator doesn't feel that you have the ability or the capacity to deliver the improvements required. C3 means that they believe you do. C2 is still, that doesn't mean you're perfect, and actually C1 doesn't mean you're perfect. C1 means you're providing a good level of service and you've got plans in place to improve where you need to improve. C1 organisations will not necessarily be 100% compliant with all of the consumer standards. So, sorry for the confusion though, that's what I mean with that is really what sort of compliance level. And we're not aiming to move from C3 straight to C1. It'll be an incremental process that will go to C2 first, probably following an inspection, and then at a later date move towards C1. So it's a longer journey. It's not something that will be fixed overnight, unfortunately.
Thank you. And so what do we need to achieve that C2 or milestone 2 by the end of the year? Is it the 2 fire safety related items?
Yes, it is those, but it's also, there are electrical items as well. Just have a quick look. So where we have outstanding electrical remedial works which have been identified as part of an electrical inspection, they need to be completed by the end of December. Where we will still be non-compliant with the electrical regulations because we will still have some new electrical inspections to carry out. Doesn't mean there's remedial works, but we need to do new inspections. So that's not classified as high risk, but I'll just give you an example.
Conscious of time, I would quite like to move on. I believe that's all David said. I'm hoping.
Thank you, Chair. It could be a quick answer. First point of milestone 1 is the data we have about our homes is up to date and we have a clear picture of our current performance and compliance and safety standards, which is good because you won't know what you've got to do to meet all the other milestones until you've got that picture. But in milestone 4, the second bullet point says we will have an up-to-date stock condition survey for all our homes. I would like to suggest a rewording of that bullet point to say that we have a continually maintained stock condition survey for all of our homes. Because I think part of the issue that we've had in the past is that we have not had that list of what state of our homes, so we haven't known what to do. Do you agree, please?
I do agree. I think you probably can't see it, but there's probably an asterisk against that, and down at the bottom it does talk about repeating stock condition surveys every 5 years. That's no. But this is an extract from the strategy, so to your point, I absolutely agree, and we'll replace stock condition surveys every 5 years.
That is certainly something that we expect to happen. I've seen some hands of shots up, so Ed and then Tim and then
I'm very sorry, I'm going to have to get on my digital accessibility course here, because it's the third meeting of Oris with a case where a detailed screenshot with lots of detailed important text has been included, and in fact in this case, as you find, there's an asterisk of other relevant important text hasn't even been included in itself. If I were a visually impaired member of the public, I would have absolutely no way of reading it.
That's a really helpful concept, thank you. I think you have a point from Tim.
Chair, I just want to say I want to thank Nick actually for kind of explaining to me how I'm supposed to be reading this report, because I did find it difficult to understand exactly what I was looking at until Nick's explained. I don't think we have a meeting in December, do we? But I think we have one in January. Could we ask that in January we get a report back to say whether the milestones that are to be completed by December 25 have been completed, and if so, and if not, why not? And at that point, I think it would also be useful to know how many of the issues that we have, that having completed the sort of audit, how many of them are actually issues with the stock, and how many of them were just issues with not having the information to know whether we had an issue with the stock, if you see what I mean.
I think the first question on the progress update, I think that sounds like a reasonable answer. The more philosophical question over the state of the asset, I don't know if you know enough to know that. Are you able to comment?
I'll have to take that away and have a think about it. It's not going to be easy to be able to pull that. I'll try and, but in the update, I'll try and pull that out for you.
Thank you very much. I think that would be appreciated. I think we can move on. So thank you for your time. That's certainly good investment for the rest of the meeting. Thank you for coming to explain that. A meeting management question to my colleagues. So we've been going for an hour and a half. I had hoped that we would complete another chunk of reports on given the attendance from the external members before we have a break. Is that acceptable? Do you want to have a break now? Yeah, sure. Okay, all right. 5 minutes? Sorry. Thank you. We've got all our councillors back. So we will get it. So we have a collection of 3 reports effectively. So we have a report from the Bristol Holding Company, and also from Bristol Waste, and also from Royal Homes. So I think we are dealing with the holding company first, which makes sense. Are we hearing from Claire or from Bristol?
I think Chris is going to speak to it.
Thank you very much, Ed. So we'll hand over to Chris.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon all. My name is Chris Smith. I'm the Group Finance Director for Bristol Holding. In the pack, you will see Bristol Holding's annual audit and assurance summary report. I'd just like to take the opportunity now just to say a few words about that in terms of the key areas, and then pause afterwards for any questions. So, just as a reminder, Bristol Holding's principal role is one of governance and assurance for the shareholder in the companies, in the council's companies. So Gorham Homes and Bristol Waste. So it's also there to ensure that the key risks and mitigations are understood, reported, but more importantly actioned. In its role, Bristol Holding also attends the quarterly audit committee meetings for Bristol Waste and for Gorham Homes, as well as attending their respective board meetings. So therefore, Bristol Holding is in a good position to provide assurance to the shareholder. Bristol Holding also chairs the quarterly assurance meetings, and that's their meetings in which the strategic client, BCC, are represented, but also the companies. And it's again to run through some of the key KPIs and run through some of the key performance measures. It also attends the shareholder group meeting. That is an important meeting, a quarterly meeting, that's chaired by Councillor Dyer, and it's attended by Nick Hibbard, Andy Rothery, and other key members of the executive team. So it's in that forum that the key areas risks are reviewed, but also company performance against KPIs and progress against business plans. The group risks also for the companies are reported quarterly, and the BCC's risk system is again updated with its key risks, and again importantly the key mitigations and actions. In the last year, the audit committees in both companies have made very solid progress. Since their formation, the audit committees have become established in both subsidiary companies. Considerable ground has been made since their inception. In the last year, Bristol Waste and Gorham Homes have been busy updating policies, procedures, refreshing risk frameworks, and also working closely with internal audit to strengthen controls. The audit committees take the lead on the development of risk management processes in their respective companies. They advise their boards on key risks and best practice on an independent basis. And the companies will update you more on this later in their individual reports. So, it's also important to know that after a tender process last year, we changed our external auditors. PwC have been our auditors for many years. We appointed Bishop Fleming, and during their work to date, there have been no material issues identified. I'll just now pause for any questions, any comments.
Yes, so there's been questions on Bristol Holdings according to the specific and John.
Thank you. This committee has talked a fair bit about the Stepping Up programme over the last year, although really it's domiciled within Bristol Waste. Is it something that you've concerned yourself with at a Bristol Holdings level? Are you assured that all is working as it should be at that level?
Yeah, so this is an issue that goes back some time. So the circumstances we're absolutely aware of, and we're up to speed with the way that Bristol Waste are dealing with it, and we are comfortable as Bristol Holding that that is being dealt with appropriately within Bristol Waste.
John?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chris, for the report. In the written report, I see that it says that Bristol Holding will support FRP to finalise the liquidation process for BE 2020, expected to take place by the end of 2025. Could you just explain what's still left to be done on that? I presume that there's, I presume that all costs have been recognised and there's going to be no impact on the financial statements of Bristol Holding. Can you give an assurance on that?
I can confirm there will be no impact on Bristol City Council's statements. In terms of the work and the liquidation, it's going very well. Just to explain, liquidations of energy providers take up to 4 years because you have to reconcile all of the accounts. They've gone very well. We're comfortable with the reconciliation process, that it is delivering as forecast, so that's to plan. And to answer your question about where we are in the process, we're all but there, apart from liquidations have to go through, as you're probably aware, HMRC clearance. So we're really in the queue at the moment to tell, because there's a bit of a backlog. So FRP have made their representations, but we're anticipating that we'll get clearance very shortly, but it's not in our hands. All the other elements, substantive elements, are complete.
Okay, thanks, Chris. That does provide reassurance.
Okay. I believe you have a question from Joe.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if this question is a bit premature and possibly it's, there's more to be said that will answer it better. I just noticed, I noticed you do comment about the importance of the financial statements and your external auditors, etc. Could I just ask a little bit about budget management and the management accounts reporting to whatever levels are appropriate? As I say, perhaps it's going to be commented on later, but I thought I should ask it now so it's not missed.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question. So the budget process clearly is carried out in each individual company. There's a very clear budget process and planning process. There's a lot of scrutiny around that and transparency. It's the same for Bristol Holding as well. Bristol Holding is very, as you can imagine, very thin, very small company, just a couple of people, not a lot of activity. So with Bristol Holding, it's not so material, but that process is carried out as well. So, and then we have an annual business plan that's scrutinised, approved, and dealt with at the appropriate time. And then through the year, we manage against those budget totals. So there's clear transparency around where we are as a business, where all three businesses are.
Okay. If there are no more questions, we'll move to, I think, Gordon Holmes. And I think we're hearing from both the chair of the audit committee and the CFO.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just by way of introduction, I'm Andrew Martin-Johns. I have been on the board of Gordon Holmes for the last 3 years and chair of their Audit and Risk Committee. A little bit about my background: I'm a chartered accountant. I worked for Deloitte for 30 years, done 20 as audit partner, and since then I've been involved in a number of positions as a non-exec director, mainly in housing associations, large charities, similar companies. So hopefully I bring a bit of expertise to my role as chair of the Gordon Audit Committee. I'll take the report as read if I may, but I'd just like to spend a few minutes just drawing your attention to some of the key activities that we've been up to during the year. First of all, it's just membership of the committee. There has been a change during the year. We had a recruitment process to replace a retiring member of the committee, and I'm very glad to report that we've appointed somebody called Julian Turner, who has a lot of experience of the construction sector, as well as being a divisional finance director of one of the major national developers. So he brings a lot of expertise, particularly in the commercial risk understanding, etc., to the committee. We've set out the meetings and attendance in our report, and I'm satisfied with the level of attendance and involvement. We've also been involved in other meetings during the year. That's either meetings with internal audit, or indeed we were involved in the selection of our new external auditors with Chris Smith. Just on risk and compliance, obviously it's a key focus of our business, the Audit and Risk Committee. We've also involved internal audit quite a lot in this year, so we asked them to actually look at our system of management of risk, and also in the second report actually look at how we've embedded risk management within our organisation. I'm glad to say that we had 2 reports which gave us reasonable and substantial assurance in this area. We also undertook a new risk appetite exercise, and this is with the board of Gordon Holmes, and this helped us again to focus on what we should be achieving, what we're trying to aim for in our risk management. As you might expect in an organisation where we're involved a lot in construction, risk, we monitor health and safety in quite some detail. And again, I'm glad to report that we identified no serious shortcomings in this area, both within our LLP partners and within the Gordon organisation. Financial statements and performance management. Again, we've involved internal audits during the year to look at risk management and performance management. And again, they included and gave us substantial assurance in this area, which we assured our board certainly. We've also met with our new external auditors, and in terms of the planning of the audit for the year, at the moment our financial statements are not yet signed off because our external auditors are waiting to review the audits of the 3 LLPs, whose results we incorporate within our financial statements. We believe that those will be finalised by the end of this month. IT and cyber security is obviously something which I think everybody is concerned about. Certainly our audit committee have looked at this in some detail. So during the year we've received reports on compliance with GDPR. We've had an overall IT report giving us assurance on the security of the systems that we use. And we've also managed to negotiate a new cybersecurity insurance policy during the year, which again provides additional assurance. In terms of the internal audit reports during the year, our report does actually show those reports which have been undertaken during the year, and I'm glad to say that we've received on all those areas either substantial or reasonable assurance. Another area really which again we focus on is governance. I think a key action during the year has been the appointment of a new governance manager, somebody called Darren Hartley, who has extensive experience in this area, and he has helped, I think, significantly draw the strings together, if you like, on this area. So, key things that we've been up to, we've obviously been actioning recommendations from the internal audit review of governance, including a review of the standing orders policy and declarations of interest procedures. We've conducted an audit committee effectiveness review, plus a board effectiveness review, and again drawn up actions which we have to the large extent now acted upon. We also carried out a self-assessment against the UK Corporate Governance Code 2024. Again, that produced a number of suggestions, recommendations, the majority of which again we've actioned. Many of them actually really reflect on the actual reporting within the financial statements of our governance procedures. So that's really a quick summary of what we've been up to, but very happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Can I ask one question, which is, you mentioned your internal auditor's confidence in the LLPs. Is that a new issue this year?
Sorry, internal audit confidence in the LLPs?
Yes. You said that was something that was...
Well, they did look at, yes, they did look at a previous year actually at our monitoring arrangements of the LLPs. They do not specifically carry out internal audits on the LLPs because these are basically run by our development partners. What we do though see is reports or policies of the LLPs to give us some assurance that this is the case. So for example on IT, we looked quite carefully at their IT and cyber policies to give us some reassurance that there were good controls in operation in those areas.
Who would like to comment first? I think Tom and then
So with regards to the cybersecurity and IT, the assurance there is very, well, reassuring. But I do have some concerns, especially as we know that this is becoming an increasingly fraught area, and with the rise and use of AI, it's becoming more sophisticated. So it would be good to have some further assurance that they will not be resting on their laurels, and we will continue to look at cybersecurity, particularly in this area.
Yeah, I think as part of our regular LLP meetings, I think that is a topic which does come up. And certainly within the Gorham organisation, we have regular reports on whether interesting things have happened. So we've had a couple of phishing attempts, for example. We've actually used those phishing attempts as a bit of a training session really for our own staff to be more aware of attempts to penetrate our systems. But to a large extent, our systems are really quite simple within Gorham. It's the LLPs, I suppose, from a chair of an audit committee perspective, I'm more concerned about.
Thank you. Okay. So, David and then Nick.
Chair, can I come in on that? Councillor Blackensop should be aware that any audit committee that I attend, cybersecurity does get a good grilling.
Okay, thank you. Nick?
Thanks. So, two questions then. I wonder if you could expand on the financial accounts for this year. You said they're not available, but is that proceeding according to the audit plan, and will they be on time? And secondly, does the audit committee of Gorham Homes consider the performance of Gorham Homes? Is it meeting the targets and the objectives that BCC set when creating this company? Is it financially self-sustaining? Is it churning out the houses that the council would like it to?
Okay, just on the first point on the audit timetable, certainly the audit timetable which we discussed earlier in the year has not been complied with, but this is it's been complied with to a certain extent in that the actual audit of the Gorham bit effectively has been undertaken and no issues have been identified. It is the audit of the LLPs, which is undertaken by a different firm, which has slipped. And there is a limited amount of influence we can push onto our LLP partners to actually speed that up. They're very aware that they need to get going, and we've been sure that they will be signed off this month, but it is quite difficult to actually push much further on that score. On the second one, monitoring of performance, to be honest, the board tends to monitor the performance. We tend to look at the risks. So one of the risks we have is not being able to deliver at pace. So that is something that which we do look at every audit committee meeting. We actually look at we have a finance and risk report produced for us. We interrogate people quite severely on why things perhaps have slipped from the original timetable. We need to understand the reasons, the causes, how we are managing those risks, etc. So I can assure you that we do push on that area.
Thank you. Any other comments, Dave?
Thanks, Chair. Thank you very much for bringing this report. There's one word that's caught my eye. So in 7.2, so I'll just read out quickly. Fraud, legal compliance and whistleblowing is a standing item on each ARC meeting agenda. It was reported during the year by executives to ARC that they were not aware of any such risk crystallising. Crystallising feels like quite an interesting choice of verb. I would expect maybe to be materialising that sentence. Is there any particular intention or am I perhaps misreading the use of facilities here? I have to admit, I always use the word crystallise rather than materialise. So if a risk is crystallised, it's actually happened, we should be concerned about it. So it is the same, I think probably the same as your understanding, really, of that word.
Okay, thought it'd be helpful to validate, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, so thank you very much. And I think we move to Bristol Waste, and I think it's Robert.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Robert Pritchard. I'm Chair of the Audit and Risk Committee at Bristol Waste Company. On my left is Richard Williams, our Managing Director. And on my right is Kevin Hayter, who's our Finance Director. By way of introduction from myself, I'm an accountant. I've represented organisations at national and local level on boards, and I'm currently also chair of as an independent member of Midland Metro Limited. So first I'd like to thank Chris for his positive comments in relation to the Audit Committee at Bristol Waste Company. It's always good to get that sort of feedback from those that you report to, so thank you for that. I wasn't proposing to say too much this afternoon, Chair, but perhaps just give you a few highlights from the paper which has been distributed. In paragraph 2.5, you'll see an observation regarding committee effectiveness. And like Gorham Holmes, we've also had an external evaluation of our board, and we've also carried out the self-assessment of the ARAC team at the last Audit Committee meeting. Both have confirmed what Chris has been saying in terms of the performance of the committee. In terms of the work of the committee, in 3.2, you'll see that we naturally focus upon risk management. And I think in the last 12 months we've seen massive strides in terms of the formality of the risk processes and in terms of its usage by Bristol City Council's internal audit team in terms of developing their overall plan and in terms of developing the scope of each particular assignment. So we now focus upon significant risk against the risk appetite of the organisation, and we consider the current residual risk at management team, audit committee and board at every single meeting. Taking on board Councillor Coombs' observation about the timing of the report, we're very conscious that this is in relation to the year ended March 2025. So the risks that I mentioned there, certainly things have certainly moved on. Commercial income is progressing, and indeed results from August and September have seen approximately £120,000 per month added to the commercial revenues, which may well be about £40,000 a month at the bottom line. Our risk is still showing as amber on our risk profile, but we're very hopeful that we will hit our commercial targets by the end of the year. Vehicle availability remains an issue and has led to missed and late collections and dropped roads. And when combined with the heat wave that we've witnessed in the summer and the freshest flu that hit us last week, has led to problems. But recently we've been fitting new back ends to the vehicles, the bin lifting equipment, and we're very hopeful that will see much improved statistics as we move into the winter period. Albert Road Baylor, that represented a single point of failure, but with Avonmouth coming on board, we now have backup arrangements, and indeed that has allowed for significant maintenance work to be undertaken on the Albert Road Baylor, which starts this weekend and goes on for 9 days. So once we're over that, there will no longer be a single point of failure, and we have 2 very active Baylor arrangements. Further development of the risk management systems continues, and at the Audit Committee we now receive a risk report from Kevin's team relating to mitigating actions which we intend to take us from a residual risk to a target risk that we're happy with in terms of the board's expectations. 3.3 deals with the working arrangements with the internal audit team. And I'm very pleased to say that those working arrangements have improved significantly over the last 12 months again, particularly this year because Sim and his team have for the very first time been able to issue an annual assurance report which gives us a satisfactory outcome. And that is because we've aligned the internal audit planning with our risk assurance arrangements so that we're all focusing on the things that really matter to the business. And in 3.4, you'll see that we've gone further than just relying on internal audit and other internal and external assurance reports. We've integrated an annual report from the Health and Safety Director and from the Head of Procurement to give us assurance in relation to those 2 key areas for our business. The final comment I was going to make again refers to the external audit. We were delighted to be invited by Chris and the team to contribute towards the process of the new internal auditors. I think we made a good choice. We appointed Bishop Fleming, and the outcome of our first year showed that there was a good working relationship with the finance team and a successful outcome in terms of the overall opinion and the management letter which we were reacting to. Perhaps I'll pause at that stage, Chair, and if there are any comments, we'd be delighted to answer them.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. And I'm just about to Councillor Blackman's off point. Looking at your Appendix A, the summary of internal audit work, I note that you have an information security audit action dating from 2021 that's unfulfilled, and you don't have a cyber security option on your work plan. What are you intending to do about that, please?
That one especially for you. We have we paused following a report we were made aware of with Bristol City Council's Service Cyber Security last year. And this year we have undertaken penetration testing, both internal and external, as part of the process to move towards Cyber Essentials Plus during the coming year. And that is being started in the next few months.
That is good to hear, but it does need to go on your work program to make sure you're maintaining cyber security.
Absolutely, and it's certainly on the risk register with the appropriate assurances, controls and assurances within the risk register.
Thank you.
Which we monitor.
Tom. So thank you, Councillor Wilcox, for raising that and stealing one of my questions. But it is good to hear on that response, and again, thank you for raising that. In which case I'll ask a slightly different question with regards to the commercial income. Good to hear that there has been some progress made on that, slightly concerning there's still some out there. How far are you sort of looking at that? So both in terms of how far into the future are we looking for commercial income contracts, how long are those contracts generally tending to be, and are these still all within basically the Bristol area, or have you started to expand further around the region? Whereabouts are you getting commercial income contracts from, as a point of curiosity?
Thank you. Perhaps I'll take that one. In terms of the length of contracts, they're variable lengths. Some are up to actually tenders that we're putting in up to 5 years in length, depending on the request. So there are a variety of lengths. In terms of location, we're looking centred very much on Bristol, but we're looking at opportunities in the surrounding areas. So by surrounding areas, we're looking at Somerset, we're looking at Gloucestershire, we're looking at Bath as well. However, we're not looking at Kent or Scotland. Okay, so it is very much centred around Bristol, and we're a little bit opportunity-led at this point in time. We had an opportunity recently in Devon, based down in Exeter,
and we did look at a contract and an opportunity there, but it was a substantial running of their recycling facilities down in Devon, which would have actually merited the distance, but I don't see us going much further, certainly going no further towards London.
Good to hear on that. So, in general, the southwest region, which I appreciate is a very badly defined region, but the southwest.
Very, very much so, centred and focused on Bristol.
All right, thank you for that. Nick?
Okay, thank you for adding on sort of the key risks in terms of operations, which I asked for last year, which is great. I wanted to raise stepping up again, as I understand it is resident legally and functionally within Bristol Waste. I wonder if you could tell us, is that the current situation? And I believe in the public statements earlier there were talk of bills unpaid. I wonder if you can reflect on that, whether it's troubled the audit committee at all this year.
I anticipated that you'd want to talk about stepping up. We are very much aware of it, although myself and Kevin weren't involved in that. So I'm aware of the background with it. We do a monthly review of outstanding and aged debt, and stepping up has been repaying that debt over a period of time. In fact, I did have a freedom of information request from the resident referred to earlier about the repayment of that, and we did provide the information to the individual at that point.
Thank you. And does the company still exist and still rent or have office space from Bristol Waste?
I'm not aware of stepping up as a company, whether it still exists. It's repaying its aged debt and has repaid a certain amount in accordance with the plan at this point in time.
Thank you. Any other comments from my colleagues? Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thank you to both companies. Before you go, could I just ask one question, I think, Chris, which is great to hear that there were updates from both companies. Great assurance about the process. I did note the report from Gore and colleagues about the delays to their accounts. Do you see that having an impact on the City Council, on your accounts, or indeed the City Council accounts?
Yes, good question. It won't have an impact on Bristol Holdings accounts, but it's clearly a part of the process for the council's accounts. So I think there is, I think the deadline is quite a tight deadline. So, but provided the work is completed by the end of October and then the accounts finalised in November, I think that that would be sufficient. But there's a timeline to meet that for sure.
I think that seems pretty tight, actually, but thank you for the report. Right, well, thank you to all three companies. We'll see you next year. I think we're moving on to consider audit reports. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make one comment. In the last meeting, I had agreed that the new template for reporting on limited assurance will include the name of the directorate as requested. Unfortunately, this is not the case, but Appendix 1 and Appendix 2 relates to growth and regeneration, and then Appendix 3 is a corporate report, but it is led by Resources Directorate. Over to Neil. I think Neil Malcolm from KPMG will introduce the summaries.
So, could you introduce yourself and then talk us through the report?
Neil Hewison, partner at KPMG, and I lead our work supporting Simper in the in-house internal audit team. So if I start with the emergency planning summary report, as you can see, this is a limited assurance opinion on the effectiveness of emergency planning, and that is driven by a lack of capacity in the emergency preparedness team to operate the controls that team has put in place in respect of undertaking risk assessments, testing emergency plans, and conducting training and exercises. And this is important as there is a significant risk on the corporate risk register concerning the emergency preparedness team and then being overwhelmed in the face of incidents. Now, important to note, there are a series of areas where we've identifiable control environment is working well. That's presented at the bottom of page 78 of the pack. So, for example, the oversight arrangements through the Corporate Resilience Group and the Local Resilience Forum. But focusing on the actions arising from our work, there are 6, so they are presented at the bottom of pages 79 and 80. All have been agreed and target dates set and owners assigned. So, for example, they are relating to the review and refresh of emergency plans and associated procedural documentation. That is subject to recruitment, back to the capacity and resource constraints in the team point. Tightening up of governance arrangements, so for example, the Corporate Resilience Group's terms of reference, tightening those up, and then a more robust approach to training and exercising, and also debriefing from them to identify learning and improvement. So, those are the issues that led us to the limited assurance opinion. I'll pause there, happy to take questions.
So, who would like to go first? I think Joe and then Ellie.
Thank you. Thanks very much for this. I'm just looking for some guidance, really, in terms of two things, really. One is about with your scope and objectives for this audit. We have in there communicating emergency planning processes with key officers and managers, and how the team liaises with other stakeholders. I'm not sure, I think maybe you mean external stakeholders, not sure. But then I couldn't see, I couldn't see anything to do with those much in the positive points. And then equally, I couldn't see them though in the, in the agreed actions. So that's my one question. I'll ask the other one as well, because maybe it's just easier for you. One of the things I found a little bit concerning, really, regarding the agreed actions and the areas for, putting things right, is the deadlines. I find those deadlines really rather far ahead. September 2026. I mean, that's nearly a year ahead. And so I'm just a little bit perplexed at some of those. Why are they so late? So maybe you can just give some assurance regarding your the position with this audit, given we have got a limited assurance, which isn't comfortable really for anyone.
Before you answer, I'm aware that the Penn Service and the Housing City is in the room, and it may be more appropriate for her to you may be able to comment on some of those future comments. Would it be helpful for you to comment now? Thank you.
I'll certainly comment on the timescales first, if you'd like. They have been realistic in terms of the resource. The other thing is the resourcing has literally just joined us in Bristol City Council, so we're being really realistic. We are moving all those actions which were already in place, not just started, and they'll be done as soon as possible. Some of them are on annual cycles that do require working with our partners in police, fire, ambulance, etc. So we've been realistic to deliver, under promise and over deliver on time, whilst getting that new resource in, because they've been in less than 4 weeks. And I think in elements of the external agencies, what our colleagues in KPD refer to, were the working with our, what we'd call other agencies, i.e. police, ambulance, and volunteer agencies, which are very important in an emergency. That wasn't a massive scope of the audit, but they did look at some stuff in terms of how well it was documented. I'm not aware that they actually spoke to those agencies to understand, if you like, that side of the coin.
Okay, thank you. I think you comment from that.
Just wanted to put a bit of colour on this. I was involved in emergency evacuation in my ward a couple of months ago now in Ashton Vale, when we had a bomb scare and 60 odd households were evacuated, about 200 people were affected. It didn't go smoothly. We've learnt a lot from that process. We've had a review session, and I'm hoping that the review is being fed back into the team, so I just wanted to make sure that that does happen. So a lot of work has gone into that. We've also shared that with the community as well, because I think people need those reassurances when something happens like that that doesn't go to plan, that it won't happen again. As a ward councillor as well, it's really important for me to have that assurance. So this is slightly worrying that there is still limited assurance in this area, and I think it's just worth thinking about what that means on the ground and how important that this new role is going to be, and how important it is, I think, as Jo said, to really make sure we do focus on those targets and get on it, because that meant that people were displaced overnight, people missed work, people couldn't get to their cars, people had pets stuck at home, people missed medication that was stuck in their houses. There's real implications where things like this don't work, so it's an incredibly important team, and it's incredibly important that we get this right.
I think that's evident. Nick.
Thank you. I was just reflecting when you said a new member of staff is starting and they've got a lot of work to do. I was thinking, is it reasonable? It's a year is what we've got as the target. And then actually it's 2 new members of staff who have just started, right? And we're still looking at a year to deliver these urgent actions. This is the emergency planning team. You'd think they could move a little bit faster, especially with 2 new people in a team of how many?
It's only 4, and I actually have to plan for them to be able to go out to incidents. And when they go out to incidents, obviously they can be out for 12, 18 hours, and therefore BAU work they have to be able to be, their well-being and rest is also important for them to be able to do a job. So they respond to emergencies as well as do all this core, if you like, day work.
Okay, question from David.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to talk about the first bullet point on paragraph 4.1, which reads, the Corporate Resilience Group was relaunched in December 2024 with the purpose of reviewing national security risk assessment of chronic risks. I'm a little perturbed about why it needed to be relaunched, and considering we just relatively soon come out of a planet-wide pandemic, that this process wasn't front and centre of the Council's emergency planning process. So can I have some defence about why it needed to be relaunched, please?
I think in a nutshell it was about making sure it was redefined to do the right things going forward. It might, after the pandemic and other incidents, and there have been many incidents in the city in the last post-pandemic, they wanted to make sure it was rightly focused, if you like, looked at the right things, and also that it was supportive of the national risk as well as literally the risk in Bristol and the incidents have quadrupled and so forth, so that it was really, it's just to be focused on the right things rather than pre-pandemic things that were the same landscape.
Okay. Can I ask who is on the Corporate Resilience Group, please? Is there anybody at director level?
It's all directors.
All the directors?
It's not all the directors, it is the members of our directors with our main emergency planning manager and the emergency planning team. I can certainly list their names, but recalling them off the top of my head.
Does it have a chair?
Yes.
Louise?
Patsy Miller.
Patsy Miller.
Patsy Miller.
Thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions on this report? Well, thank you. And we'll move on to the next report. And I believe Alex Mitchell is here to comment from the perspective. But are we review up with this?
Right, that will be Tiffany Owen, KPMG manager, working alongside Neil and the in-house team as well. So our second report is on preparedness for extreme weather. So we look at how the council is assessing both the risks and its preparedness for severe weather events. And you'll see as well that we've been limited assurance overall. So on a positive note, we gave reasonable assurance over the council's preparedness for responding to severe acute weather incidents through the support of the emergency preparedness and resilience team. However, there's a gap in the systematic identification and assessment of longer-term and severe weather risks due to climate change. That's across the different services and the preparation of long-term mitigation plans. So the actions for of management are detailed in the report that you can see in front of you, and include the development of training resources to assessments to better integrate climate risk, completing corporate assessment of climate change risks, and integrating this into business continuity management processes. So you'll see that most actions are due to be complete in the first half of 2026, and have so far been reviewed by the corporate leadership board. So happy to take any questions, also Alex in the room as well.
So, could I ask if there are any questions? Tom? Thank you. And I apologise, because this one's going to get a little bit parochial. Due to the ash dieback, there are large sections of the portway which are due to have their trees removed. I mention this point simply because of the adaptation of severe weather risks. This isn't necessarily a heat wave, flood, weather, storm conditions, but that lack of tree canopy is going to have substantial impacts for the microclimate, if you like, of the portway in conjunction with all the other lovely climate change impacts that we anticipate. That's been taken some time ago, and I wonder if prior decisions like these, which will have a climate impact, are going to be taken forward into that assessment of climate change risks, and how we are going to be monitoring the actions of the council with regards to impact assessments that aren't necessarily business related, but are related to the council's, for example, parks management. You moved further forward, thank you.
I'm sorry to confuse you, there's no microphone on there. So this report is focusing on how well prepared the council services are. It's sort of business continuity, but in the future, sort of, that we're trying to address, rather than the wider resilience of the city, which tree canopy would form part of. But to answer your question, so all key decisions are subject to environmental impact assessment, should be aware, and as part of that there is a question about climate resilience, and as part of that, I guess we're getting better and better about understanding what those impacts will be, or risks are to the city, and how our interventions or policies relate to that. So it's not within the scope of this piece of work, but it is absolutely in terms of the scope of the work that we're doing on a daily basis, looking at key decisions. And we are currently producing the refreshed climate emergency action plan for the City Council, and there are a lot more resilience actions included in that than there have been in previous iterations.
That's good to hear on that. Slightly different question then. We obviously will be having an increase in various different climate events, noting several floods in recent years, additional heat waves. It's that point on drought that's concerning me, because that's not necessarily one for Bristol itself, but we think around where we're getting our food from, for example, Sunset, and how the impact's going to have on there. I appreciate it's not Bristol specifically, but is there any work being done on how that could impact the council and the wider city?
So we would consider the impacts of drought on as part of the risk assessment that's proposed on the management actions in their corporate risk. Obviously there is a wider risk of drought to the city, and some of the things that we'll be doing as part of the action plan is things like promoting advice to residents on how they can take action to be more resilient, and that's not just themselves, but how they might contribute to that wider resilience. So being more water efficient would be one of the ways in which they could do that. I certainly know that South West Water, and Bristol Water, are looking at their future storage requirements in the light of climate change.
Right, thank you.
Any other comments? Ed and then John.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for bringing support. There's a couple of things I just want to pick up. Firstly, this one's a bit more of a comment here. I was slightly concerned about the framing here around it, suggesting the council isn't preparing for long-term changes or risks due to climate change. I would dispute that as a statement in its own right. The report itself does seem to focus more on kind of things sort of technical internal guidance, internal communications, equality, environmental impact assessments, and not to diminish the importance of those, but it doesn't touch upon the investment and adaptation mitigations that is taking place, so perhaps that's a bit of feedback more than anything else. And then one more specific point in there. So I understand that the Sustainable City and Climate Change Manager and the Learning Development team are looking at developing learning resources to help staff and services prepare for the impacts of climate change. And that in itself appears very welcome. There are lots of learning resources out there around not just climate change, but climate change adaptation and mitigation that already exist. I used to work in online learning myself, and I was actually involved in making multiple courses with multiple universities on this exact topic. So my question is this potentially reinventing the wheel? Are there ways of actually making use of the lots of resources that are already out there? There may be something that needs to be very specific for internal purposes, I get. In case that's helpful in terms of actually the use of time for what I know is available, a team of very, very limited capacity, but with clearly a lot of responsibility for, for our collective future.
Okay, thank you. I think I think that's a very helpful statement. I think we'll move to the next question if that's okay. I think Joe, you have the next question.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, number 2 in the audit finding, unless I'm misreading it, it's just so basic. It says services do not have an approach to identifying the risks. And then we have a little bit like the previous report, we have a very late deadline for putting that right, 31st of July. I'm surprised that this is even just limited assurance. I mean, is there any assurance? I know that some positive things have been found, but I'm struggling a little bit to get over that statement that services, we're talking about services across the council, do not have an approach to identifying risks even. And that seems to me to be a very basic starting point, and it's not in place. So I'm just struggling a little bit to grasp the severity of this report, I suppose.
So I can provide a little bit of context. It wouldn't probably be for me to have a view on the auditor's finding, but I could provide a bit of context before or after if that's helpful. So this is about the severe weather risk arising from future climate change, looking beyond the current emergency planning time horizons, which the previous audit was looking at. So this is about the future and the medium-term future rather than the immediate severe weather that we might encounter this year, next year, if that helps context. But perhaps
I think that's as much as we can say. Okay. Someone have that, Tim.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm just wondering really how deep this needs to go within the organisation in terms of preparation for events that are not necessarily 10, 20 years in the future, but events that could be 1, 2 years in the future now, the way things are kind of accelerating climate. And the one example that I'm thinking of specifically is in our local parks, we still have a policy of not cutting the grass underneath large trees, but we do cut the grass in the large expanses of open area. And I did raise this the other day with the Parks Department that, that's something that I think should be reappraised, because the places people want to sit when you have extremely hot weather is under the trees. They don't want to sit out in the expanses of open areas. So, it seems to me that even things like that we should be thinking about now in terms of the way we look at everything we provide and all the shade and that kind of thing for hot experiences. Obviously, rain and flooding is another matter altogether. But I do worry that we're looking at policies for how we'll cope with major events, but we need to really be embedding this into all our departments to be looking at what can we be doing, for a gradual rise in temperatures. That means every year we do have extremely hot spells and people need to be able to take shade, and what are we doing to counter that?
I think the question of whether to mow or not to mow is quite a hot topic across the city, but I think the question of how you consider adaptations is well taken, but that is part of your strategy, isn't it?
It's a really good point, and I'll take it back to colleagues who deal with it, but it's that tension between leaving them at longer for the sort of habitat improvements versus the mowing. So but it's an important part, and we hadn't thought about it myself, so thank you.
I think so might be the last question on this, that's okay.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed that in each of the management progress updates, that the update is it's been reviewed by the Corporate Leadership Board in September. Are there any updates you can share with the committee about the progress and actions that the Corporate Leadership Board have asked for, please?
So the Leadership Board haven't asked for any different what's in the document. It was the 25th of September, so the updates are limited. But we did hold the 25th of September we held a leadership forum where we had a workshop with all the heads of service and directors looking at how well prepared they felt they were about what the impacts they anticipated for their services. And so effectively we've begun that work on that risk register by talking to the people who are involved in delivering those services. And that flushed out, in the same way as we just been talking about things under the trees, flushed out a whole bunch of issues that perhaps we as a team wouldn't have thought about, but services are already thinking about. And I think the reassurance that many of those services are already thinking about those, it's whether or not it's being done everywhere all the time is the question.
Okay, thank you.
One last point about
So the issues that the Corporate Leadership Board raised, will they be coming to the Environment and Sustainability Committee?
There were no issues.
I thought you said that there was a list of things that they wanted to do.
That's the agreed management actions.
Right, okay.
Okay, so thank you, Alex. Thank you. So we've got a final set of reports on procurement compliance. I can see the head of service manager is in the room. Who's speaking to us from the audit?
Yes, me again. So our final report on procurement compliance. So we assess compliance against the
I think we might have a bit quiet.
Sorry, is that better?
Yes.
Thanks. So we assess compliance against the Council's procurement rules via sample testing of contracts awarded at different values. We found stronger processes in evidence of compliance with the rules for contracts with values greater than £25,000. But we've given limited assurance based on the weaker control environment for procurement of contracts under £25,000. So for example, our sample testing found limited evidence that 3 quotes were being obtained for contracts between 5 and 25,000, which is required by the procurement rules. Other findings you'll see include the need to ensure contract details are consistently recording key systems and also to improve the oversight of expenditure under £5,000. So the actions are agreed with key stakeholders, they're set out in the report and all on track to be completed by the update we received.
So thank you. I'm not going to ask the first question because that would be too typical, wouldn't it? Who would like to ask the first question on this report? Yeah, I would, yeah. I'm just waiting. That's Jen, thank you.
You don't always rely on me. Yes, I'm just curious about how the council is set up and how the systems work and the financial systems, and the auditors can answer this. Is there a procurement module in the financial system
I think
that is used?
Would be better from the team.
Whomsoever, I don't mind.
Possibly Matt would be a.
Hi, Matt King, Governance and Procurement Lead. So the short version is no, they're not integrated together. So the e-tendering and contract management system is not fully integrated with the finance system. There is a level of so we do insert unique identifiers into the finance system to link payments to contract. So that is essentially that is our way of linking contract spend with the finance system, but they're not fully integrated in the way that any ERP system might be, for instance.
Okay, thank you. So I'm the last question now. So I've got 2. I've got one for the team and one for the the auditor. So the one for the team is there's a couple of points about the distinction between above and below 25,000. So there's a couple of points that are surprising around I think there was an authorisation comment form that wasn't signed by the right person. And there's a question about whether dates are accurate in the contract register. So I would like your comments on that. The question I'd like to ask you is most of your comments are below 25. So is your comment of limited assurance, is that specific to procurement below 25, or is it across the
Yes, the limited assurance is driven by those under 25,000, so with limited findings regarding those.
That was my impression, but I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, that's
I guess, Matt, this is your area as well.
Can you remind me, Rob? I'm sorry.
So, a couple of comments on above 25 was...
Yeah. The authorisation sign. So in terms of so we have above 25,000. We have a authorisation process where the decision is made and signed off by the relevant officer with delegated authority. And in one instance, it was found that a head of service who was not the correct head of service, but it was at the right level, but was not the correct head of service, had received an authorisation through an electronic signature system that we use for authorisations, and rather than rejecting it, saying this is nothing to do with me, had signed it. So essentially that obviously shouldn't happen, but it was a decision made at the right level, but not by the right person. We'll just be kind of making it even more obvious that the officers should not be signing documents that are not related to their service area. So that was the answer to the first one.
Brilliant. Because that's a training issue rather than a system issue.
Yes, it is, yeah.
And the other one was about where there are questions on the accuracy of the contracts register for things.
So we've been undertaking a lot of work to make sure that the quality of the data of the contract register is improved. We are in a much better position now than we were a month or two ago. We're on track to complete that work in the next few weeks to a month. So essentially, it's just all aiming at trying to make sure that we both have an accurate contract register with all the details you'd expect, but also that we have the processes in place to make sure that that is maintained, so that it's not just a one-off exercise and improving data, it's an ongoing thing that we've got that assurance.
Any other comments? Loads of comments. Well, this procurement so far. Joe first, and then everyone else.
Yes, sorry to have to come back, but I think this is one for the auditors, please. Because once again we have, we had explanations given for the previous two audits, but for this one again, we have very late deadlines, in my opinion. And I want to ask the auditors really, are you happy with that? I presume you are, if you've accepted them. But what are you doing, if anything, in the intervening time? Is there any kind of interim, feedback that these actions are on track to be delivered by these late deadlines, or will you simply wait to do a follow-up after the deadlines have elapsed?
So I guess he's already happy with the dates of I guess. Well, I won't say anything else.
So in terms of the deadlines that are being put forward, they are management's rather than ours. We report them to you. I think in terms of your point around what are the intervening controls that could be put in place given the length of the implementation periods, I think that's a really important question. And that should be subject to follow-up, I would suggest.
Will it be?
So you know that any audit that is limited assurance will be followed up, but I think what is important with this review, it's a corporate review, which means that it will require a lot of inter-department or cross-working across the organization. So that's why I was satisfied with the time limit given, because there's a lot of training that needs to happen. This is not just about one service area, it's across all the service areas. And then the second point is that we run that report for you every quarter, where we will give you a progress in terms of any actions that are due at a particular date. So any audits, any actions within this review that will be due by the time we write another report, they will be picked up and will be followed on that report. So that's how they will be followed up. But this report will be subject to another audit early next year.
Thank you. So there are questions on the front page, starting with David.
Thank you. My question is one of context, really. How much of Bristol City Council spending is between £5,000 and £25,000? So that we actually know how big this problem is and how much is actually being not authorised correctly.
I just add sort of where to that as well.
Yeah, what directorate? Is that something my actor is able to mention?
So we have some estimates, and so in terms of the 5,000 to 25,000 band, which is the one that's got received a limited assurance, there is approximately £22 million worth of spend in total. That's in comparison with the over 25,000, which in terms of purchase orders raised is around 2.7 billion.
Can I just add some further detail around the process? With regards to any spend above £500, an officer has to get approval from the spend control panel first. The next stage is if they get that approval, they submit an online form for any spend below 25,000, and they should then evidence value for money, so they should submit at least 3 quotes to prove best value. And then there's an automated service that once they've done that they automatically get approval. So that's the area where we are putting in those management controls, maybe humanising it a bit more, making sure we're checking that a bit more to make sure that the compliance improves. That's the area that's concerned.
Yes, thank you. Firstly, quite concerning, I think, actually, I'm not never going to suggest less scrutiny in an audit committee, but quite concerning the level of scrutiny that's now in place on those contracts between 5 and 25k, when we're talking about that being, was that 1% or 0.1% of the spending over 25, contracts worth over 25k. So that does feel a little bit puzzling to me. I'm interested to ask the auditors, so on the first audit finding, there are limited controls in place to ensure best value is sought for contracts. Could I just ask you to clarify what you mean by best value, please?
So, we don't want to lecture on everything about best value. But specifically how you progress whether this is value for money.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So it's defined by the council, and the procurement rules set out that best value should be sought for those contracts 5 to 25k by having at least 3 quotes. So that's where that comes from.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just to mind if I follow up on that? Thank you. So I think this links a bit to what I said before in terms of the scrutiny, and thank you for outlining the process there around spend controls that this council has had for the last couple of years now. This does have a very real world effect on day-to-day service delivery. So take the area committees which all members sit on, which will vote on local projects, often transport related, for roads, for parks, often very small in scale, sometimes very often in that 5 to 25k range, those kind of projects. And what we're hearing on the ground consistently from the transport team, from the parks team, from other related teams, is that actually it's very hard, it's very hard for them to actually get some of these projects out for procurement, because when these figures were in place, such as the spectrum for £500 or that particular contract range, a lot of inflation has happened in that time. So those relative values haven't. So we've now got a bit of a situation here where we're likely to see an increasing amount of projects kind of potentially fulfill these things, will become much harder to deliver on a practical level, simply because the value of those, the monetary value of those projects has inflated in line with often exceeding inflation. So I'm just concerned actually that this might be a problem that grows in this setting, but actually creates a very practical barrier on service delivery.
Do you want to comment on that?
I think the spend control level, that process is new for the past year or so, mainly in response to the council's financial position, where we need to resume control and make sure that essential spend is happening. And so I can understand why officers will find that challenging to get work done because it means they have to do another process. But they are automated, so it should be quite quick. As long as people have planned and they know what they want to do, then it should be quite quick for them, as well as the 25k process, which is an online form. So it shouldn't stop work happening. However, I think there is probably something for us to learn from which we are in those management actions is can we make it easier? And the self-serving element, it might be that the non-compliance is a result of that, so we need to make some adjustments. But unfortunately, that is where we are with the controls for spend, that it has to be essential. But if they work with us, we could put longer-term contracts in place to remove the administration that they need to do to deliver those projects.
Okay, thank you. So we're moving on now to thank you for KPMG, but thank you to the procurement team for summarising that. Policing management points, conscious of time, there are two things that we really have to do today. One is the treasury management policy, because that's going to, or the update, because that's going to full council, and the other is the harbour committee terms, because again that's going to full council. So I would like us to deal with those things now, and then we'll see how far we get. Sorry? Okay, right. We can do it quickly, but we'll do this other thing first. So the treasury management report, I'll just read your speaking staff.
Afternoon, yeah. My name's John Clayton. I'm the Finance Business Partner for Treasury and Tax. The report set out to you today this afternoon is one of 3 reports which goes to Audit Committee first and then on to full council. The first one being the Treasury Management Strategy, which gets approved at the budget process. The second one is the mid report, and this report is the annual report for 24-25. This report is for noting, there's no recommendations. Just to note that the treasury management activity is heavily regulated through legislation and codes of practice due to the numerous risks associated with investments and borrowings. In summary, the treasury activities and treasury indicators were in accordance with the treasury authorities' strategy and government regulations, and there are no breaches to report. The key points in the report are set out now. So, as part of the strategy, the council sets a medium-term borrowing requirement of 996 million, with a large portion in relation to the HIE new build programme. £315 million of that was planned to be undertaken in 24-25, and that was mainly in relation to borrowing needed to support the financing of that programme. The council does have a policy of deferring borrowing while it has adequate treasury balances, and therefore during the year £160 million of short-term PWE borrowing was undertaken. 45 million was in February and 120 million pounds was in the March, and overall that has a blended interest rate of around about 4.87%. At the end of the financial year, the council had liquid investments of 55 million at March 25. This course of action minimises the net financing cost of the authority, also reducing the council's exposure to counterparty risk, i.e. the risk of investment of default. The long-term debt at 31st of March 25 was £600 million, with an average interest rate of 4.56, and as referred above, earlier, £165 million was borrowed from PWE during the year. The council's debt is made up of mainly PWE loans, market loans, of which £35 million of those market loans are classified as logos. Council continue to monitor the yield curve of the interest rates to see if there's any opportunities to further repay these loans without penalty. Just to note, during the year, £35 million of logos were repaid at par, and they were refinanced along with £25 million of PWE maturing debt.
Okay, I think that's enough there.
Sure.
I wonder if colleagues have questions on this. I thought Jonathan might.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you, John, for the report. I'd just like to check if the original budget for 2024-25 was aligned to the Treasury strategy. The reason why I ask that is that I see that the CapEx, the original budget was 577 million, and the actual outturn was 277 million. So there's a difference of 300 million there. But if we look at the borrowings, the Treasury strategy indicated that we would, which was approved in February 24, that indicated that we would need to borrow 315 million. And if you look at the debt on either a gross basis or a net basis, the amount that we ended up borrowing was about 200 million less than was forecast in the Treasury strategy. Of course, I appreciate that not all the borrowing would relate to financing the capital programme. Obviously, you've got working capital movements and that sort of thing. But there does seem to be quite a large difference between the 300 million underspend on CapEx and the 200 million difference on the drawdowns. So there's a difference of about 100 million there. And I just wondered if you could explain a bit about that.
So there was a significant slippage in the capital programme, which was the main difference, the reason why obviously the original planned borrowing was 315 and we only undertook 165. Now the significant difference would be in relation to slippage in the capital programme, and that would have largely resulted, that's largely related to the HRA build programme, where it did have a large amount of money was planned to be borrowed for that programme, but it never undertook any borrowing for it.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that, and I can see that there's there was significant slippage in the capital programme that related to the HRA. It just, and I mean, you can come back to me on this, John. It just seems to me that if the original budget was aligned to the Treasury strategy, then the difference between the underspend on CapEx and the difference between what was planned to be drawn down and what actually was drawn down would be much closer than they actually are. But you can, I'm happy for you to come back to me on that because time's moving on.
Okay, I think I have a question for Superintendent and then.
I'll keep it very, very quick. I was under the impression that the loans from the PWLB were generally at a more favourable rate than sort of going out to the market, but looking at the table on page 126, they seem to be at a much higher rate than. I'm wondering, is that because a lot of those were taken out before interest rates began to come down? Although I do notice we had 165 million of new borrowing from there in the last financial year. But I'm just wondering why the market rates look so much better than the public loan board rates.
Yeah, so in terms of that table, a lot of those market loans were undertaken quite some time ago. So therefore that's the reason for the lower rate. Now the PWLB rate obviously is higher because it's taken over a long period when at times where interest rates were higher and more recently higher again. So it's basically we've got a much smaller portfolio of loans from the market compared to the PWLB.
One comment from me. Just want to congratulate you on point 19. I think is the key thing we should focus on. Have we hit our performance indicators? And my interpretation is that we borrow rate at a lower rate. We borrow money at a lower rate than the market, and we get higher returns than the market on our investments. I think that's the most important thing, and that could be made clearer next year. That is worth pointing out, and hopefully that's the height and done.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, John. So we're going to move to the Harbour Committee report, if that's okay. Thank you. So I believe it's Tim to
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. This is a supplementary report to the report that came to the July meeting, and just brings one small matter back to this committee for further consideration relating to the voting arrangements. For the Harbour Committee, it also appends the terms of reference for the Harbour Committee to the report for your endorsement. Since your meeting in July, a number of matters were raised with me relating to the voting arrangements for the Harbour Committee, in particular in light of the public consultation relating to the Harbour Revision Order. And questions have been asked, and I've been asked to do a report here just setting out the options and the guidance nationally relating to Harbour Committees for your further consideration as to whether or not the co-opted members on the Harbour Committee should be entitled to vote or not. It is entirely a matter for your discretion. It's something that is done in most of the Harbour Committees, is my understanding, across the country. The co-opted members do have the ability to vote as part of the decision-making of committees. So we would be a little bit of an outlier if we weren't to proceed in that way, but equally we are Bristol, and we do things differently here when we choose to do so. So I think it's really a question for the committee's judgment. I think that's more of a judgment for members in terms of how you see decision making generally taken in this authority, whether that is only by elected members or whether in exceptional cases you would allow, as would be the case here, co-optees to have a vote. I think that's all I'll say, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before I take comments, I would just remind members that we are being asked to make a specific decision here. This is not a report for assurance, but we are being asked to decide if co-opted members on the Harbour Committee should vote before this report goes to full council. So it's important that we do that. Nick,
thank you. So I think the key point here is that we discussed this report to an extent at our last meeting, and that was based on a recommendation from the committee report, the committee model review group, and they recommended to us that the co-opted members of the Harbour Committee were non-voting. At that meeting, we went through, we talked about a number of amendments that were proposed, but those amendments were all voted down on the argument that we should, as an audit committee, be going over the heads of the committee model review group that has been working on it for the last year. And so I think that if we do not accept this paper, then the earlier paper that we recommended 3 months ago would still stand. Therefore, I am inclined to leave the recommendations of the committee model review group as they were, because I trust that they spent much more time and an effort on this than we are likely to today. One point is that at our pre-meeting I suggested that a red line version comparing the current terms of reference with the new terms of reference would be helpful, such as you can do in proprietary software run by Microsoft. That is not what has happened here. We've been given something which says it's been done with the assistance of AI at the top. Track changes prepared using AI. It's absolutely awful. It is far worse than the track changes that you get from Microsoft Word, and it is of zero use when comparing these two documents. It just tells you that one paragraph is gone and another paragraph has been entered. But even that aside, I'm not in favour of reversing the recommendations of the committee model review group.
I think
Thank you. I did see that format, and having just come back from a Green Party conference, that format felt worryingly familiar. I wanted to focus on, just so it's really, really clear for all of us, so the essential details of this: there would be 11 members of this committee, 7 of those would be elected councillors, 4 of those would not be elected councillors, and only the 7 elected councillors would be entitled to vote on matters. Just to clarify, that's correct?
That's what Nick said.
That's what's been recommended. That's what's been recommended to us by the Harbour Committee. Is that?
No, the report. Yeah. Yes, but the report that you're having here doesn't make that recommendation. The implication from the report is that all members of the the Harbour Committee including co-opted members should vote. I think the implication is that that is more normal in, so I think this has come here because there's a national code of practice, I believe, for Harbour committees, where I think on most Harbour committees all members vote.
Yeah,
so
that's what I wanted to clarify, yes. So who is recommending a different structure to what the model review group has recommended, and what are they recommending specifically? That's my question.
So Chair, if I may, this is a report. So we were due to take a report to full council, and at the point when we were briefing the party group leaders and the Lord Mayor, this emerged as an outstanding matter. It's one of pure governance rather than something that is necessary for the committee model review group to reconsider. And it boils down to whether or not the audit committee and then full council in due course feel that co-opted members on one of our lawfully constituted committees should have the ability to vote or not. The recommendation from the committee model review group was that they shouldn't, but that recommendation was made prior to further responses and questions being raised as part of the Harbour Revision Order consultation. And that consultation closed between the last meeting of the Audit Committee and when we were due to go to full council. So it's being brought back here for just further consideration at that one point. It really is up to the committee as to whether or not you stick to the recommendation as previously approved here as Councillor Coombs has outlined, or whether you actually want to expand the voting ability of the co-optees.
And I think from a good governance point of view, there was a suggestion that could be amended at full council, and I think that wouldn't be the right approach. It's really important that it comes through reflections as a committee. But
just to follow that up, so I've got up the Port Good Governance Guidance, and so thank you for attaching this to the Constitution Update. It's very helpful. So page 37 details recommendations on harbour management committees for local authorities. So they've been very specific here. They don't mention anything regarding the voting rights in here of people who are not elected members or co-opted representatives, as they describe it, that I can find. And the word they use around exactly what the composition is of that group is very ambiguous. It says approximately 50% LA elected members of a constituent authority. These do not have to be local authority councillors, but can be co-opted representatives. So there's a lot of ambiguity in that language in the first place. So I actually don't think we could take it as read that what that's saying is that it should be 7 councillors and 7 co-opted representatives. That's really not clear at all.
No, I think that the 7 to 4 is Bristol. I think that the model, the national model is that there will normally be parity. There will normally be 50% council and 50%.
Sorry, this one I'm saying, Chair, that the guidance from the Port's Good Governance Guidance is not clear. It does not clearly say it should be 50% councillors, 50% extras. The wording is really clunky, to be honest. So I see no reason to mess with what's been recommended originally for 7 forward, only members voting.
Okay. That's Tim first, and then
So, unfortunately I have slightly less confidence than Nick that the committee model review group will have really delved deeply into this. So I wondered whether at the time that it was discussed they were even aware that usually non-members have voting rights on these committees, because I think that's what we're saying is where these committees exist, in most cases they have voting rights. Was that made aware to the committee model review group at the time? Because I suspect it wasn't.
Chair, if I may, no, Councillor, it wasn't. It's something that subsequently came to light, only following the closure of the consultations. So it's and just to be clear, I agree with Councillor Fraser that the guidance is far from absolute on this. But the clues in the name, it is just guidance, and we are able to adopt a model that suits our own local circumstances. But what I do know, and what I've been told is that pretty much every other harbour law authority in the country does have co-optees with voting rights, so we would be an outlier in that sense.
So I think it would be fair to say that had the committee model review group had that level of information, it may well have made a different decision on this particular item. And I'm happy for us to vote on it. I'm not worried about what the decision they made because they didn't have the information at the time.
So we have Tom and then Joe.
Just to briefly second Nick's point around the AI, I think that's a reasonably helpful point of feedback, and we won't dwell on that for too long. I apologise because I obviously was not part of the discussions last time, and I do have some sympathy towards the idea that with the work of the Committee Model Review Group, we don't necessarily want to overrule that. Was it explained what the logic was as to why they came to this decision? Was it a point of sort of democratic process? They aren't elected members, therefore they shouldn't have voting rights. What was their actual rationale given? Was that actually supplied?
As I supported that committee, I can confirm, Councillor Benkinsop, that was absolutely the rationale for recommending, as per their report last time, that it was just councillors who would be able to vote on the Harbour Committee because they're democratically elected.
I do have some sympathy with that point, but conversely, if we've got an area where we do have people who have, quite a lot of substantial capability to contribute, especially on something as technical as this, we might want to consider whether or not their views ought to be heard in the committee, and if they can simply be overruled by members, we might want to ask whether or not the committee will be operating as effectively as it otherwise could be.
I mean, to be honest, that's my thing, Tom. I think it's a bit like a government body for school. You have a collective group of people who are charged with making the decisions, and I particularly don't see why you privilege one group over another group. It's not as if people are being elected to the Harbour Committee specifically to be representatives of the Harbour Committee. I guess Patrick has a slightly different position in that case, but most people that's a key part of that area. But anyway, I can accept the budget views on that. I think Joe had a question.
Yeah, just quickly. I find it a bit odd that we're being asked to make this decision in the Audit Committee, I've got to be honest. It seems foreign to me for us to actually be taking a decision on this. Now, if you're saying, well, no, it's a recommendation to Council that we're giving, it amounts to the same thing, though, doesn't it, really? And I'm not quite sure. Well, I would question, is it really right for the Audit Committee to be making this recommendation? And I would recommend that it goes back to the model review group.
I think that would be the ideal. I think the issue is that committee has ceased to exist. I think so the option would have been to re-establish that or recall it, and I think that hasn't happened. But that hasn't happened. I don't think there's anything else we can say.
No, I think the recommendation can be made from this committee in the same way that the recommendation was made last time, and equally when the report came through last time, if there were matters that needed to be tweaked. I recall when we took the substantive recommendations through the Audit Committee back in late 2023 to put in place the new arrangements for working under the Committee Model of Governance, there were a number of changes that were recommended by the Audit Committee as part of their deliberations on the Council's constitution, which were subsequently reported into full Council. So I think it's okay that that is done here, and the committee's got two choices. It would be good if you approved the terms of reference.
Yes. I think ultimately it's a question of judgment, isn't it? Where both views are reasonable, but that's the point, isn't it? Is that you could say it's more important to be in line with natural good practice, or you could say that it's more important to not mess with the recommendation that was already made. I mean, both those things are reasonable. So, but we do need to make a decision. So I'd quite like to move to a vote, but there are a couple of comments that will need to be captured. So we'll take David and then Nick.
So just to clarify Joe's point, I think it's in the Constitution that any constitutional changes have to come to Audit Committee before they go to full Council. So that's why it's come here. I also then like to go back to Nick's statement, if I heard him right, that if we didn't approve this, it would nuke all the other changes that we suggested or approved previously in audit. Is that have I misunderstood you?
It was my reading of this report that this would overwrite a section of the previous report that we recommended.
Oh, yes, I think that is correct,
So, therefore, by not approving this, we do not overwrite what we did 3 months ago.
Okay, sorry, I think that doesn't.
I want to be really, really clear about what we're voting on because I'm worried we're going to enter a lot of confusion and end up voting on the opposite thing of what we actually think should happen. Are we being asked to vote to change what the committee model review group had recommended previously and has already been through this audit? Okay. And so if we reject this, what we've said before will not change.
That is correct.
Great.
Can I just check one thing with Tim? Is there anything else here that's a change that's essential to the conditions?
So in addition to the voting point, we have subsequently updated the terms of reference for the Harbour Committee, and they're in the pack here. So your endorsement of those, I would hope be a formality, irrespective of how you vote on the other part of the.
I think we need to make two decisions. I think we need to make a specific decision over whether we think co-opted members should be able to vote or not. And then we need to make a second decision over whether we approve the rest of the updated terms and conditions of the Harbour Committee. So I think that's what we're being asked to do today.
Point of clarification, we already have a committee where there are co-opted members who do actually vote, and that's the Downs Committee. So there is the precedent already within the council to have co-opted members who do vote.
Yes, absolutely. That would be like the Downs Committee. Equally, on this committee, Chair doesn't vote. So you can pick an example according to which bits of the constitution you like. So, okay, I think we're going to, last comment, and then we're going to move to it.
So the obvious people to ask are the Harbour Committee, or indeed the Economy and Skills Committee, what they think. And I can't see any evidence in this paper that the members of that committee have been asked about their governance. I asked Andrew Brown, who's the chair of both of those committees, for his view, and he was on the committee model review group, and it was his position. He thought that they co-opted members should not vote because it is the councillors who are accountable for the decisions. But he would go to the wall for it, but that was his opinion as chair of all of those committees. That was his opinion 3 days ago when I asked him, and that was also what the model review group recommended.
Any other comments before we move to a vote? So we're going to vote. We're going to vote now on specifically whether we think co-opted members of the Harbour Committee should have voting rights. Please raise your hand if you think that co-opted members of the Harbour Committee should have voting rights. Six. And please raise your hands if you think that co-opted members of the Harbour Committee should not have voting rights. I don't think there are any exceptions. Thank you very much. Second vote, please raise your hands if you are happy to recommend the updated terms and conditions of the Harbour Committee to full council. Okay, and please raise your hands if you are not content. Thank you. And I think that means there are no abstentions. So thank you very much, everyone. Fierce debate, as usual. Nothing to do with all this, and absolutely critical. I think Simba says that we have to do something else, which is also critical, which is the update of your Q3 report. So please could you say which page of the joint pack I read it to, and what you need to update us on that issue.
There's nothing I'm going to do, Chair, just agenda item number 14, internal audit 25-26 Q3 priorities. I'll take the report as read. So what I want to say, Chair, is that we are asking the Audit Committee to approve the Q3 plan. We do a rolling plan, as you are aware, so we bring another request for it to approve in November for Q4. So there's every opportunity for the Audit Committee to influence what we are doing out of the Chair to take any questions.
Do members have any comments on the Q3 priorities for the internal audit? So we are happy with Simba's recommendation. Are we happy with the recommendation for the internal audit?
I did have one very small question. It is a very small one. We've only got 10 planned days for procurement and contracts management, and as I understand it, procurement is one of the areas where we are most concerned, but I don't know whether or not that's, we're fine, we can sweep it in 10 days, so please,
I think that's sufficient, given that we've just had a report from procurement, and last meeting also accepted another report. So there's a lot of ongoing work with procurement, so I think it's sufficient. But if there's need, we can still put more audit work. We have also appointed Jeff to get for that as well.
So with that assurance, are we happy with the Q3 priorities for internal audit? Yes, we have. My information, thank you. So, conscious we've gone over time. There are two areas that we haven't addressed. One is risk management, and one is debt. So, please leave if you'd like to leave. Are risk and debt people able to stay for another 15 minutes? Enough members of the committee are able to. Then would we be happy to deal with those issues, or would you prefer to deal with those issues next meeting?
Sorry, will we need to vote to start the meeting? Because we've exceeded the allotted time already by 15 minutes.
Yes. I'm asking you whether you would like to do that, or whether you'd like to close now.
Firstly, the debt issue comes at the next meeting to be able to give it. I think that's the one that you said might have to go into exempt session as well.
Yes.
It is also worth pointing out.
That one, come back when we've got time.
Yeah. So, would you just like to end the meeting now, and we'll deal with those issues next meeting?
Chair, I do think Bren's trying to chime in there.
No, it's fine. I was just going to point out that you mentioned the exempt, the people who would be here to answer the exempt sessions aren't here anyway. So, yeah.
But that doesn't mean that people might not want to ask questions based on the data in the exempt report.
My preference would be to keep working, because we rolled over one report to this meeting. If we keep on doing that, then we'll find ourselves a whole quarter behind on all of our reports.
I'd suggest that we didn't extend on the basis that this appears to be a scheduling issue, to be honest. We have got things we've got to get to as well. And if lots of people here aren't actually able to answer those questions, then it feels a bit futile.
So I would recommend that we work until 5:45. Are people happy with that? Or enough people are happy with that? 5:45 is enough people to be for it, is what I mean, to discontent. Okay, so we will do that. Risk management, therefore. Now, Aldo isn't here because he misunderstood the risk of train being delayed. So you're dealing with this a bit, I believe.
You're going to take us to reports.
Yeah, just by way of introduction, my name is Hugh Jones. I'm Finance Business Partner for Risk and Insurance. I've got two parts there. Do you want me to, in the interest of time, just lead one to the other? Yeah. In terms of the annual risk report from 24-25, really it shows there's a continuation of a transactional style of risk management. The focus being on process more than the adequacy of sort of the management of the risks. Within the report, we've used the most recent internal audit report from 24-25 to reflect on the reporting period. And within that, it shows some of the actions that were included in that report and shows that they're in progress. One of the highlights from that report is that we now manage and report the risks on IdeaGen, which is the internal risk management system within the council. Moving on then to the Q2 corporate risk report. There are 17 corporate risks on there, 2 of them scoring the highest, critical, CR60 and CR58. There is one that has improved, which is CR63, and that's insurance arrangements within the council. There's been a lot of good work with Zurich, who are the main insurer, to both reduce the exposure for the council by mitigating that by passing that on to insurers, and there a lot more engagement with various services with Zurich, just to show how we're managing the risks. CR15 and CR58 have increased in exposure, and in Q3 we'll be working with the risk owners to understand the effectiveness of the mitigation actions that they're putting into place. Within that Q2 report, there's also a figure 4, which shows all 156 risks across Bristol City Council and the average scores that apply, and this is a good indicator of the levels of exposure throughout the council. Looking forward within Q3, we're really getting improvement plans well underway, moving towards sort of enterprise risk management approach, and we'll be focusing on risk assessment, the control effectiveness, so how effectively are we controlling those risks, looking at the scoring, the reporting of risks, the assurance that we are managing them, we're not just playing lip service to them, and also mapping out those risks as well. Any questions?
So we'll start with Tom. So just a quick one from me to kick us off. There's a bit on the first part of the report about how the risk reporting process is not sufficiently dynamic and therefore has become too transactional. And I found that very interesting wording, and I wondered if you might be able to elaborate.
So at the moment, we are managing the risk, or we're managing the risks, really by just noting the risk. So we're having a system where we're, for instance, putting on IdeaGen, where the risks are listed, but there wasn't the substance behind that in actually mitigating the risk. So now there are risk owners, and they're working. There's a lot of developments done in them actually working through those risks and lowering the risk to the council.
Thank you. On the second part of the report with regards to the corporate risk register, just in terms of the possible in-year financial deficits, obviously we have other risks that are being that are related to that. For example, CRR 51, adult social care, may be financially unsustainable due to national and local pressures. I assume that the owners of those risks are liaising or at least communicating with one another, that there are positions to kind of make sure that we are everyone's fully informed of what their own particular risk may mean for the whole.
I'll take this one, Chair. It's okay. Yeah, absolutely right. There's contributing risks that will drive the overall financial health of the council, including adult social care, financial performance, savings plan delivery. So that is a collective conversation we're having, not only from a risk management point of view. We've recently established an audit and risk board, so we are taking a corporate lens onto risk and putting accountability and ownership in terms of management, but also through our financial monitoring. So it's something that we are reviewing through all of our regular financial reporting, but then at the corporate level, recognising that risk as well.
Great, and it's always good when we can confirm that we're talking to each other.
Okay. I think Nick was next. Nick, David, and Joe.
Thank you. Thanks for staying late for someone else's topic. I've got 2 really specific questions for you. So, looking at the 2 risks which have been de-escalated from the corporate risk register, which are 48 and 64, looking in the registers themselves doesn't seem to be an explanation for why they've been de-escalated, but there is an explanation in the report, just towards the end of page 4. So 48 about affordable housing. The reason this risk has served its purpose, the issue of affordable housing will be reported in a new action strategy. That just sounds a lot like we're bored of that risk. And it's served its purpose, we don't need to see it anymore. If the action strategy is mitigating the risk, then wouldn't that be a mitigating action that reduces the likelihood of the risk, therefore it can fall off the register of its own natural accord? And the second one, 64, risk of adult social care market failure. Reason the score has reduced to 15 for 2 reporting periods. Sure, but there are a lot of risks still on the register which have been rated 15 for an entire year and they're still there. So I feel like we should apply our rules more consistently.
On your first point, can I take that question away and get a succinct answer for you? On the second point, I think it's really around the risks that we're able to manage at the time. And so there are a number of risks on there. And really, when we're highlighting a specific risk and dealing with it, then we're obviously moving the score on from there. But again, I'll take that away and come back to you with a full answer.
Okay. And David?
Thank you, Chair. My question is about what the people on Transport Committee call the elephant in the room, which is CRR 58. It would be really good to have some detail about this, particularly since it's risen dramatically and gone into red and the top right-hand corner. So, can we have a briefing about CRR 58 at the next meeting with detailed information, please?
I think that, yes, I think that would be a good idea. Can we ask that to
And if you want to call it the elephant in the room, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. Joe had a question, I believe.
Thank you. Yes. Just a bit of a comment, really, to be honest. I mean, I'm terribly conscious of our role as the Audit Committee as regards risk management. You know, and I'm not used to the detail or getting into the minutiae of particular risks, or I'm more interested in the arrangements for risk management in the council and how it works, you know, and what's our policy, and then is the process actually reflecting that policy accurately, except perhaps for the financial risk, of course, which we would have been interested in as the Audit Committee. So I was just going to ask, or maybe comment, that I'd like to see a little bit more about how risk management works in the council as a whole. You know, I know we're looking at the corporate risk register, that's fine, yes, and those risks end up there for a few different reasons, good reasons. But I think it is also certainly of interest to me to know, how does risk work generally across the council? How do risks get identified? And this, you know, the thing about bottom-up communications regarding risk, and the best people really to identify risks very often are the people on the ground.
Thank you, Joe.
And you know,
that's a really helpful point.
Okay.
I think, conscious of time,
Yes, go ahead.
I'll ask Andy to comment on
that. It's just comment, really. I'm not looking for any great long debate.
Thank you, Joe. No, good points. I think there's two parts of this. We're currently actually refreshing our risk policy that does set out kind of the approach of Bristol City Council in terms of managing risk and identifying risks. That's our internal policy approach. But then also I think your question is about how do we set our governance up in terms of feeding up risks, and that is something that we're also doing at the moment. We've reset our audit and risk board in terms of reference. So that sets I know kind of a high level senior officer representation, but then it's flowing through director and management teams as well. So we'll be able to share that information.
Okay, thank you. Ellie, and then Tim.
Sorry, very quick one. I'm really interested in that, that you're refreshing the risk policy, and I think given the sentence that got picked out and the fact that this is quite a big change, culture change, it sounds like having to happen, which I think is incredibly important. Is that something that's going to come back to that we could see at Audit? Is that job policy or?
Yeah, it will come to this committee.
Question from Tim.
Yeah. Just very quickly, I'm a bit worried about the fact that we almost seem to be accepting that a risk that is sitting just below the highest level, i.e. something on a 21, can sit at that level for over a year and still be at the same level. But you know, it really feels to me that those risks should be coming down. because that's the whole point of having a risk register, is to do something about things that are at that level and bring them down. So the number of risks on here that have sat at that same level for a consistent length of time, I find concerning.
That's a really helpful comment. Would you have a comment on that?
I think it's just that we're moving from that transactional, and certainly in Q3 is where we're starting to make people accountable, and then actually really getting into the detail of how they're mitigating those risks, and looking at it and moving it forward, as you say. So I think this is the period, certainly Q3 and Q4, where we should see some change within the council culture.
Thank you. I've got one question, which is about in the report on the other deteriorating risks, which is CRR 15, and the movement here is that it's gone from moderate likely 3.3 to major likely, so that the impact of having a year deficit is more severe, but the likelihood is unchanged. That seems to me can't possibly be true. Surely it's more likely than not likely, so that the likelihood must have changed, but the severity may or may not have changed.
I think it's about how we recognise that in-year deficit is something that's likely, but it's also the steps we're taking in-year to manage that, so to stop it escalating much higher. So, and that has been around financial recovery activity in the council at the moment.
It just seems a surprising scenario that the impact of the deficit would be massively higher than it was last time, but the likelihood of the deficit is not changed at all. But if that is the assessment, then yeah, fine. I always wondered if it was the wrong way around. But okay.
Yeah, it's good observation.
Well, I'll be interested to see how it changes, because it's actually the history of that. It's bumped up and down between 9 and 21 over the last week of reporting. It's fine. Thank you. So thank you for your any other comments before we leave the rest of management? We're happy to accept the reports that we've received. Yeah, thank you. Great. So I do want to look at the report on debt. So the action is to down. I actually do need this to be a non-public session, so could you stop recording and step out of the room? And thank you for recording the rest of the day.